Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today's video is one that's been very, very highly requested, and that doesn't really come as a surprise because it's about art school. And what artist doesn't want to know what art school is like, or if it's worthwhile to consider for their future, especially given how relentlessly we're taught that it's a necessity in order to be a real artist or make it professionally. But honestly, I've really already said my piece about that, as much as I possibly can. Like, I didn't go to art school, and I was able to pursue art professionally anyway. And I've shared my experiences getting those professional opportunities in previous videos, as well as my experiences on the hiring end, learning firsthand that an art degree is barely considered compared to an impressive portfolio. I also learned through experience that the portfolios I reviewed varied so much in quality that it was impossible to tell just by looking at those alone who did or didn't go to art school. There were artists with extensive educations from accredited schools with frankly low quality work. There were self-taught artists with unbelievably impressive portfolios, and there was everything in between, because art school does not, apparently, have much bearing on whether or not you're actually good at art. I'll link that video in the iCard above because I discuss it in more detail there, but my point in bringing it up is that as someone who has never been to art school and has only ever done it professionally and learned online and through self-study, there's only so much more I can say than that on the topic of art school. So instead, I reached out to one of my friends, James, who did go to art school and complete his degree, and then went on to teach art himself. Please check out his social media in the description, primarily Circle Brush on Instagram, because his art is fantastic, and I think you should see it first for context of how great this dude is at art. But the relevant point is that he actually has the insights that I think a lot of you guys are looking for in terms of whether or not art school is a valuable experience. And fortunately for me and all of you, he agreed to do an interview. More than that, he even took me to his old art school and gave me a tour where I was able to look in on that environment, both the art and student-focused common areas and the actual classroom experiences, and see how students were taught in real time. I got some clips from that tour that I'll be including and reflecting on, but I have to say, being able to immerse myself in that environment firsthand for a day was just so immensely valuable to me in terms of widening my own perspective and disproving certain misconceptions that I had about art school. And I'm so grateful to him for allowing me that opportunity. Now, let's get into the actual video, because let me warn you right now, it's long. This is gonna be a long-ass video. And it's not because of any significant amount of work on my end, but because of the sheer amount of detail that James put into all of his answers. I'll chapter this video and have a table of contents on screen with an up next section on the sidebar during his responses, so that you guys can skip to the portions that you're most interested in. But you'd better get a drink and a snack and settle in, because you're about to learn all there is to learn about art school from someone who's been there himself. But since the interview section is so long, let's start off with the tour of his school first, so that you guys can have some visual context as to what art school is really like, and see some of the awesome stuff that we saw there.
We're in art school, boys. This is James. Here we are.
Hi, this is my old school. And this is the basement. This is where they keep a lot of the craft, studio classes and stuff. Do we pass the workshop?
Yeah.
The wood place?
That's me. I'm her.
Oh, hi. Awesome. So, dude will just like straight up like teach you functional carpentry, like functional woodworking in there.
Seriously?
And yeah, and that's important for a lot of students who are of like more traditional, who are building their own frames and stretching their own canvases.
Right, that makes sense. That sounds like a lot of work.
It does sound like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you can do all that, or you can go to a store and just buy a canvas.
That's what I was thinking. Is there any value to like doing it yourself like that?
Where do we draw the line? You know,
true.
when we're stretching our own canvases, like, are we crushing our own pigments now? Am I taking cow spit and crushing seashells to get like an ounce of blue?
That's true. That's true. I guess the question is how much value does the effort itself have compared to the output?
Yeah, I think it's, right. And what of tradition do we need to preserve in a contemporary learning practice?
Yeah, exactly.
For a practice.
Yeah.
You know.
That's true.
Well, we got pizza party.
Pizza party, oh my god. And here we have a room. Cool.
What?
We entered the room.
Oh,
that's nice. Wow. Well, that sure is a room. Oh.
This is photo lab?
Photo development? Wow.
I think.
Cool. The evil within still owns my heart, so that's very Stefano Valentini for me. Not to reduce an entire aspect of photography to one character I like from a video game, but that's kind of what I just Face. Oh my god. I like that the one in the middle just completely failed you.
No, cut that part out. I don't look bad. Don't make me look bad, okay? My school.
Explain how these doors are often opened. Okay.
So if you want to be smart, you want to be efficient in art school, you keep your like student card in your wallet. You got to scan to get through all these doors, and the easiest thing to do, butt tap the thing. But as a result, everyone's butt juice is on this thing, so I wouldn't touch this. Not that I just touched it or anything.
Thank you, thank you. This has been very educational.
Wipe it back on my butt. It's all circle. It all comes and goes from the same place. I mean, unfortunately, I like this art, but this isn't what I love most about like MFA painting.
Yeah.
Or sorry, just fine arts painting.
Yeah.
Like, portraits is a really good exercise. No, it's not for everyone. Not everyone's a portrait guy. Not everyone's a face guy. But it's a brutal exercise.
Yeah.
And it works because we're hypersensitive to people. We live in a people world. We live in a society.
Yeah.
And we're constantly scrutinizing people's faces. So we have like an incredibly high intuitive understanding for accuracy in faces. So if you want to improve like accuracy and your eye skills for analytical and art reading, portraits will humble you, and they'll always humble you because you can, it'll never be the perfect face.
Exactly. That's always been my shortcoming too. I guess it's probably everybody's in that regard then. The mystery set.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's like the secret Krabby Patty formula.
Oh yeah,
and also just like the ingredients to get good.
Oh, exactly, naturally.
They don't want you to know. They lock it here, the core of the school.
Yeah, they have to, because that's how, you have to pay for your degree first.
Yeah,
open this and you're cheating.
Yeah, and once you get your degree, you can only just peek. They can't have it. You can't take a photo.
Oh my god.
Can't make NFTs off that.
That's so ominous. James is leaving me behind.
Cool.
Whoa. Whoa.
I don't know.
I have no idea what it is, but I feel like I should be jealous of the fact that they have it here.
Yeah. I think it turns you into a vampire. I think that's what it does.
Yeah, I believe you. Yeah. I believe you. Oh shit. The nest.
Student space.
My God.
I can't. It knows.
This is actually so cool. Powerful vibes.
Condoms.
Excellent.
Now I'll clean it.
I'm so glad that just happened.
As you guys can see, there are some really nice places on campus. Looking at all of these cool environments alone, this place really does look like the dream. But what I wasn't able to film for the sake of student privacy were the classrooms, the active classrooms, which were in pretty stark contrast. The soulless, dull, low-effort way that students are taught here is honestly so crushing, especially seeing it up close in real time.
So James is in the bathroom. But currently, we are in a stairwell at his art school, old art school. And it is just dedicated to graffiti. And it's something that anyone can add on to and contribute to. And I have personally now, I think, spent 45 minutes looking through the whole thing and trying to see as much as I can possibly see in it, because there's just so much. James is in the bathroom, so he'll tell you a little bit more when he gets back. But I just wanted to give some preamble, I guess, in context. There's some of this that I might have to end up blurring for YouTube or trying to at least pan away from, unfortunately, because YouTube isn't the best for artistic nudity. But we will go down to the bottom where he graciously allowed me to contribute to the wall. Well, the walls, there's quite a few. Technically, there's still 4. But there's so much. It's just so raw and real. I don't know. It's almost a visceral connection to every artist who's contributed to this. Some of them do it, you know, of memes. Some of them draw, you know, it's the thing everyone draws on everything. And some of them are just like venting their deepest thoughts and worries and anxieties. It's just all on top of each other. It's beautiful. Okay, so I did give a little bit of an intro to the stairwell, but James, tell me about the stairwell while we walk through it.
Oh, yeah, sure. This is the one unique stairwell. It's seemingly just like free reign on wall art, on content, on whatever you want. And it's a really special place because the rest of the school, it really isn't like this. You know, you can see them painting more graffiti in the art school parking lot. Why can't this extend out?
Yeah.
To that?
Seems counterproductive.
And I feel like I broke your heart. Before there.
Little bit. A little bit.
But it's too easy. It's too easy to shatter your dreams.
Yeah.
I kind of wish they made it a bit harder. You know,
Yeah.
I wish they kind of would have thrown in something like a bit appealing to a third party observing from the hallways.
Yeah.
Yet it's just not there.
Exactly.
And it can't be that easy to expose yourself.
No.
And yet it is. You just walk around and look inside.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But you know, obviously I have a lot of personal experiences with school, which I think are due more to just like my personal personality.
Yeah.
So I try not to speak. I try to be very careful about generally what I say. My point of view on things, unless I'm, I don't know, just loose cannon, feeling loose cannon. But you know, it's sad. It might be a bit discouraging to see what you've seen.
Yeah.
Or from, you know, your perspective, what we've seen. But like, this,
Yeah.
I wanted to end, especially we had to come back here because I needed to end it on here.
Yeah.
I need someone to believe that art is still alive, that it does mean something, that when you're surrounded by it and you're immersed in it,
Yeah.
it's like being part of the art school's subconscious.
Yeah.
The real AI dream of art school, what's really going on, how students are really feeling. That's how I feel walking through this, and this is unique though. I
Yeah.
don't expect most schools to have this.
No.
At the same time, I don't think this is enough of a sell for you to come to school just to be able to paint in the hallways, or
Yeah.
to paint in the one, you know,
Yeah.
the southern stairwell. Because
Right.
you can't do that in the northern one. Why?
That's so redundant. What? Yeah. But it definitely is reassuring to see just how much passion and creativity and love people still have for art, even when it can feel so draining and soulless to look through the actual teaching and educational aspect of it here.
This feels like the release. This feels like
Yeah.
art therapy for the students.
Exactly.
I bet it does feel very therapeutic walking out of school and walking through.
Yeah. It's almost like a reminder of what you're doing it for.
Yeah, the collective collab of every student in school, putting up pieces in the stairwell.
Yeah.
Ephemeral pieces maybe covered up.
Yeah.
Tomorrow or next week.
Exactly.
And it's cool that you're still able to do that just for the sake of doing it.
Absolutely. It's just art that'll, no one will ever know who made it. No one is doing it for clout or for the sake of even creating something or achieving a goal. They're just doing it because they love it. And because they're venting something important to them. Or they're drawing a dick. It, you know, doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Maybe that's what they're passionate about. I really enjoy the mysterious shrine. Don't completely understand the mysterious shrine, but it's there. And
Look at this one.
yes, this one. This, we will end on, is what I added to the wall because James told me this really nice meaning behind all of this and why we're ending it here after I started drawing it. So this is my contribution. I think it sums me up.
And there you have it. There was a lot, and I mean a lot, that I didn't get video of simply because I didn't want to film any of the students or their work too directly. But I'm glad I still got to show you guys some of the highlights. We were there for almost 4 hours, and as I mentioned earlier, the experience was so incredibly valuable to me because I came into it with a lot of preconceptions that were pretty quickly and harshly proven wrong. I'm someone who always wanted to go to art school but never had the opportunity financially. And over time, while I knew it was never something that I could afford to invest in or take time off work for, I eventually built it up in my head as some dreamy, romanticized experience where you spend 4 years surrounded by people with the same love and passion for art as you, and you have this picturesque time with your peers and mentorships with your teachers, and experience artistic breakthroughs, and then move on to pursue a litany of professional opportunities with new skills. In my mind, it always seemed like a magical time, and showing up at the school, I was instantly surrounded by, well, exactly what I expected at first. Brightly colored, artistically focused interiors, huge art exhibits, quirkily dressed artists everywhere just like me, lugging around canvases and supplies. Right away, it felt like the exact environment that I dreamed it would be. And then we looked around, and the more we did that, the more conflicted I became. All of the student-focused facilities were fantastic. They seemed like places I would have killed to just hang out and draw in. And those common areas definitely were exactly like what I envisioned when I thought about art school. But then we got more into the actual learning environments and less of the aesthetic, pretty workspaces and hangout areas, and things changed. We got to talk to 2 students that told us about their color theory teacher who showed up late, left midway through for Starbucks, and then left early very regularly, and explained that their learning experience was basically just self-directed, because she was mostly just telling them to do exercises from a textbook and leaving them be to do it. Then we got to look into 3 or 4 active classrooms, and that's what really shattered my view of art school, I think. Because these were the classrooms for the courses that I wanted to take. The curriculum focused on design, concept art, and so on. And they were dark rooms with 20 students all staring at their laptops while either one teacher monotonously droned onto a PowerPoint, or one teacher had rotating groups of students come to them for guidance, while the vast majority sat there waiting on their laptops for their turn, which James explained was commonplace. Students would just sit there for upwards of 6 hours waiting to have a moment of their teacher's still divided attention. And I get that that's kind of all education these days. I understand that, but I can get that from online learning already. In my head, the most valuable things that a traditional art school experience would have had to offer that online learning wouldn't have, those are the things that are like hands-on teaching, where the instructors are actually sharing individualized, student-tailored insights and professional advice for the real world, or even just a learning environment that's more interactive and passionate. And in those classrooms, there was none of that. It felt soulless, draining, and tedious, and based on that environment, I would rather have learned at home from an online course, which, according to James, would teach me just as much, if not more. As I mentioned with James in the interview segment later on, if I were living on campus, I think it would be livable, just because the common areas seem so welcoming and inviting and creative, and I think that leaving those soulless classrooms to go work with my classmates and bolster each other's creativity in those environments would rejuvenate me. But the classrooms alone, in my opinion, have shockingly little value, and seeing them firsthand was a deeply disillusioning experience. And the idea of putting myself into debt for something that only has value for a piece of paper that probably won't even get me a job, and a community experience that's just nice enough that it'll make the rest of it bearable, it's definitely shown me that I might not be missing out on as much as I thought I was. But the community does, to me, seem so valuable, and that's a sentiment that I've heard from former art students everywhere when I ask, and that's why I'm so glad we ended in that stairwell, because that is the most beautiful culmination of that community I have ever seen. That's the kind of raw, visceral creativity and feeling and passion and pure love for art that I always imagined I would find at art school, and it feels almost like a rebellion against the cold soullessness of those classrooms, especially when compared to these shots of the opposite stairwell that has to be kept pristine inexplicably. I think it's a striking, hard-hitting visual representation of how art, as a means of expression and even rebellion, will withstand any limits or restrictions placed upon it, and that maybe if art school weren't nearly so corporate and government controlled, it could be a place for that creativity to bloom. It certainly did in that stairwell, no matter what the world was like outside of it. But that's it for the tour, and while we left it on a sort of hopeful note, the answers you're about to get about art school are not quite so positive, but they are real, and I think that's vastly more important. I compiled quite a few questions of my own to ask for this segment, and also asked you guys to submit some of your own, the most relevant of which were included in what quickly turned into an interrogation based on the sheer number of questions I I ended up throwing at him. We did meet up to record this interview in person, but due to life getting in the way, we were cut short before we were able to finish it in a more dialogue, back and forth focused format. Fortunately, James was very accommodating, and we did the rest of the interview in the format of me simply sending him the rest of the questions and him sending back his recorded answers. So thanks to him, we do still get the full James interview experience, just with a different sort of vibe. But without further ado, let's get into that first part of the more podcast-esque interview now. Okay, so we are here with James. Could you please tell us a little bit about who you are, your background in art, what got you interested in it, and that kind of stuff?
Sure. Hi, my name is James, and I guess I'm here mostly just to provide like a little bit of a education perspective. I did work in education for a while and have a few years of experience teaching and teaching art after I did the art school thing. So I'd like to speak to that a little, but I also want to remind everyone that I am still a student, and I'll always be a student, so I'm really just a student speaking of some teaching insights.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's the attitude of most artists. Like, most good artists anyway are just looking at their journey as a constant learning process. I think the moment you decide that you're done learning is the moment you pretty much shut yourself off to a future in art.
Oh, totally, man. Totally, 100%. And if I could just like I'll speed run the your questions here. And I'm, just like everyone else, I'm trying to figure out how to live and thrive with art. I grew up on anime, cartoons, and games, just like most of your audience, Celestia. I have a few years of teaching experience. I just kind of fluked into teaching swimming at 15, did some social work inside the school system with immigrant youth in university while still teaching, and then I did art school after that, and after art school I got to teach for the city, for the local government in their art centers, which was really cool. And like to speak on art thing, I drew was fun for a kid, and I was the best in class, like many of us are, but I was mostly a hobbyist, and I quit in high school and university after to pursue medicine, and then, because it's tough, as all Asian kids find out. You switch. I went to art education, and I left there as I was not quite happy with the training. I went to like real art school, which was like the art college at the time, now university. And I originally, there's more to this story, but the short of it, I went in, finished, got a design degree, and I finished as a mostly straight A student, but in the wake of 3 dropouts and 3 academic probations. The art discussion, man. I love the art discussion. I love talking about art school because it's such a compound. We talked about it being such a compound discussion. There's so many interesting and important art things to talk about that get hit on just through talking about this one thing. Personally, I don't think it needs to be that big of a discussion. If I were to give my quick answer, it's no, probably not. You should probably not go to art school. And the kind of students who should go to art school, where art school might be appropriate for them, are if you're rich. And if that's the case, you should go to the coasts. You should go to the big cities: Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Canada, and obviously California and New York. So those are the places that would make the amount of money you're spending worth it if it brought you into like a big city with multitude of opportunities that provides over like a mid city or a small town.
Yeah, so the location is pretty inherent to the value in terms of the networking opportunities there.
Yeah, I would say it's geographically dependent. Yeah, the like opportunities for sure, and also just because the school has more resources too.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I didn't.
If it's a hot spot.
Yeah.
What that means is basically that like most people going to most art schools, in my opinion, might not be the best decision. That's what that means. Mm-hmm.
If money weren't an issue, if everyone could just go to art school and not worry about tuition, would you consider that to be a worthwhile experience for them? Or just based on what's taught?
Based on, there's a few angles to come at this from. Like, one, what's taught I'm not quite happy with because it's all online for free, and it's all on YouTube, and you can pick and choose your mentors and instructors on YouTube. You can find the personality types that like keep you engaged instead of the ones that shrink your ego and make you not want to do it, but you have to do it because you're in school.
If money were not a part of the equation, like if you didn't have to worry about the debt or what that meant for the rest of your life, would you consider just the experience, both community-wise of art school and what's actually taught in the curriculum? Like, would you consider that in and of itself worthwhile?
Yeah, so a few other things I'm gonna throw in there. So like the money, we're saying money's not an issue, okay? But there's also your time, your effort, and your attention. Your time you can never get back. 5 years of your life, depending on what stage of life you're at, it can mean a lot to some people. I just blinked and I turned 30. You know, that's crazy. I don't wish that young people would pursue academia so hard and put so many eggs into academia that they might blink and just be 30 and maybe not be entering a world that has changed a lot since when they entered the system, and also being a world that the system has not caught up to
right
yet in preparing them for it.
That is one thing I've heard a lot in terms of art school. Like, it's not something that has entered the new generation well. Like, it's still fairly behind the times in terms of what's taught, especially when it comes to making a career out of it. Like, most things, you go to school, you get a degree, and at least to some extent that degree will set you up for a career in the thing you studied. I've heard that with art school it tends not to be the case quite so much, simply because the art industry is ahead of art school. Like, the jobs available to artists after art school are not what art school prepares the artists for.
Right. And like, here's the question: can an institution ever catch up to the industry?
Yeah, exactly.
Will it ever catch up to the industry?
And it's changing faster than ever too, especially with the introduction of AI art, because that's something that we don't even know the full ramifications of yet in terms of art jobs in the industry. Things are changing faster than current employed artists can catch up to, much less students in the middle of a 4 or 5 year degree. Like, I don't think it has time to catch up.
And yeah, is there a risk in kind of being in the hyperbolic time chamber, except your time is not being extended? 5 years is 5 years, a minute is a minute, right? Every minute you're in that room like doing irrelevant design assignment is a minute that someone else is catching up or learning a more applicable skill in the real world. You may be falling behind in a sense. So that's a tough decision too. It'd be nice, it'd be real nice if money were no object. Everyone could go to school, but if that school, if the opportunity into that environment and that content comes with the price tag of the time commitment of you being committed as a full-time student, that makes it less appealing, because having to be in a building for 8 hours a day, it's like 70% of your waking life, and having to do a training program that isn't tailored to you. It's a one-size-fits-all training program, which means that's actually for nobody in particular at all.
That's one size fits all is kind of a deceptive term, because one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, and I think schools call that like multidisciplinary, or they'll use some like buzzword for it just to be like, ugh,
to make it sound less terrible.
Yeah. And the tough thing is that the curriculum isn't standardized. So what I've had in my school can be completely different from someone else's.
Well, that actually brings me to another question I had, which was, what kind of material actually was taught? And of that material, what of it did you find the most valuable and the least valuable?
Right. Yeah. My program was basically like concept art, entertainment design. And you know, for animation and stuff. It's the stuff we like. You know, our audience. I feel like we're in the same niche. That's pretty cool. So I like drawing people, spaceships, aliens, and guns and stuff, just like you guys. And we learned like design process. You know, going from thumbnail sketches, color sketch, final, basic softwares, like the basic creative softwares, basically just like the 4 Adobe ones everyone uses: Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, and InDesign. Actually I take that back. Photoshop, and no, just Photoshop is probably the most universally useful one. We didn't learn Premiere. No, and I think video is like, we should talk about video, you know. After Effects is like motion graphics, so it's not quite the same thing. And yeah, InDesign is like layout, magazine stuff.
And InDesign is already on its way out in terms of relevance in my professional experience. Like, people are already turning to Canva as a free alternative and as an easier alternative. That's just what I've seen. But is it still taught in art school? Like, was it to you?
Yeah, it was still taught to us. We had to learn it, and obviously I don't remember any of it, and it doesn't really matter. And if I wanted to learn it again, okay, I'd watch a YouTube tutorial. It's on YouTube.
But how much of what you were taught was just about like software? The word is not coming to me. Proficiency, software proficiency. Like, do you find that the amount of that was taught was excessive? Like, you could have just learned it at home and too much of a focus was put on it?
It was very much about like foundational software skills. So at a certain point in learning like Adobe stuff, their menus, there's a pattern in their menus, and you figure it all out by yourself anyway, just clicking through stuff or just looking up keyboard shortcuts and then just working backwards from there. You know, what are the hotkeys they've assigned? Obviously these are the important functions. Let's start with those. And like, that's a smart way to learn on your own, but that's not necessarily how they teach in class either. It's the basics. So for Photoshop, you probably won't learn any like interesting digital painting techniques. It'll be mostly like graphic design, like tweaking photos. But this is shit kids do on their own now, and this is shit they do they'll send their stuff off from like 3 different apps to do it, and like it's not that hard because so much of that has been automated.
That's very true. Yeah.
Oh, I should also add, yeah, so software size, I would say it's largely negligible unless you're the kind of person who really needs your handheld to learn software, where then I would say like that these classes are way overpriced for you. They're like $600 a pop, and you have to commit to the entire, you know, design curriculum and whatever. Just find a local arts center class or do something online, or, you know, slowly try and chip away at it, teaching yourself how to learn. You know, useful skill. You can never go wrong teaching yourself how to learn. We also had the art humanities. Whatever school I'm at, you know, as they've become a university, it kind of usually means that there's more of a say on like what humanities are taught. And that's usually what it means when like I think schools get accredited, is that there's just more government control over it for, you know, the extra funding.
And do you find that to be detrimental to the actual curriculum for artists themselves, the government control increasing?
Yeah, just typically speaking, like having more vectors along a certain process of getting things done is just always bad, especially for art when we're trying to catch up, when we know we're behind, when we know we don't have a chance of catching up, but to just be at pace at best. Any extra room for just more bureaucracy is always a bad thing for the students.
Yeah.
For the students.
Right, that makes sense.
There's an interesting podcast, the Drawn Today podcast, local professional artists in our city. You know, you did some Hearthstone art and stuff. It was good on the podcast. He asked the same question: what percentage? You probably saw my notes here, but he asked his round table of friends what percentage of what they learned in art school do they typically use in their everyday professional art practice, and it's about 5 to 10%.
That is shocking to hear, honestly.
Yeah.
And not good shocking.
And that came as a result of him going back to the school's portfolios, to the portfolio show, and doing the round with the students and being asked that question and having to give like a 5% answer. 5% of what I did when I went through the exact same track as you to being a working professional right now, 5% of that was useful to my daily practice. Those are strong words from a professional.
Yeah, that's compelling. That in and of itself is incredibly compelling and very disheartening, honestly. That's a low number.
Yeah, save that one. I didn't drop that one on the school tour.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, the school tour was already disheartening in its own manner, but that's
been that easy.
Ooh.
Shouldn't that easy to break, Celestia?
No, it shouldn't have, but it is. Well, okay, so we've established what's not valuable about art school, but what do you find valuable about it? Like, were there things that you learned there that you feel you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
Yeah, and it's not fair for me to say this. Not fair for me to say that I got a lot better at learning on my own and, you know, teaching myself how to fish.
Right.
But as a consequence of what I felt was just inadequate in my...
Learned more trying to fill in the gaps of what art school didn't teach you?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And it was very clear that like this is more of a personal experience, that, you know, what our program advertised that it would be they actually don't have the resources to teach you all these skills. So, but at that point you've paid for like 2 years of it already. So it's a bit of a sunken cost fallacy.
You've committed already and you can't jump ship now.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. So for most people, like if you're going going just full tuition, full time, 2 years in Canada might be like 20K. And if you're living on your own, right, that's like living on your own in a city is like 25K. You're that much in the hole. I understand that a lot of students just wanted to finish and try to make the best of it, and taking it into their own hands and just putting their head down through the rest of class. Teaching yourself how to learn is just straight up an artist 2 skill. Me and Celeste, you were talking about artist 2, artist of the now, of the future that is now, because things are moving that fast. We have to learn on our own. You have to learn to do your own accounting, learn to edit video, learn social media, learn to look up the algos and to keep up with the algos, right?
That's a job in and of itself.
Right. Like so much self-learning the artist has to do. Why not start now? First year fundamentals, art school, I first learned them from books just out of my own curiosity beforehand, but the school does do a good job teaching the first year fundamentals. These are foundational skills: observational drawing, drawing, color theory, values, like value drawing, design drawing. But as we were discussing before, as I figured out, as I remembered, they teach all this stuff in parallel, which means you have to do all this shit at once. So if you want to switch into that particular, very specific analytical mode of sight sizing your art, right? It's just like, that takes flow, that takes time, and that takes like commitment. But it's hard to make these intelligent art education decisions when you're just overwhelmed with learning everything at once. In classical art, there is a progression system, so you would not be learning this stuff. You'd be learning observational drawing first, and then you'd be learning value drawing, and then we'd be progressing from there.
Yeah, because all of those skills build upon the foundation of the prior skill that you just mastered, or at least learned the basis of.
So yeah, and like what I think is effective in this other method of teaching, the atelier curriculum, classical curriculum, academic art curriculum, those are all terms because we can't agree on what to call it, but those are all search queries for you. But about that classical art thing, it lets you do a deep dive into one subject at a time, and it just so happens that the first subject, most important one, which is how to read art, how to use your eyes to analyze art, how to see, and that's an EXP modifier. I call that, because everything gets so much easier. You'll have to read art to do your studies.
Of course, it's the foundation for everything you do.
Yeah. And if you cannot worry about reading art, if you're able to just take a few glances and be able to, chicken scratch the general shape of things, it's super helpful. I'm still so grateful for the amount of shit I ate to learn observational drawing. And honestly, it's not hard at all. I learned as a kid from a book, and it didn't need to be that hard because we didn't have tutorials at the time, but you can just literally follow along on some dude's YouTube and learn observational drawing. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it really carries on throughout everything you do in your own work too, because even being able to look at your own work, and it's the difference between saying, I know this looks bad, I don't know why, and saying, this is what I did wrong and how to fix it.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference in terms of improvement.
Yeah.
Because I spent years of my art career looking at it thinking, I know this is wrong. This isn't how I want it to look, but I don't know how to make it look right because I don't know what's wrong with it. And observational drawing is what I didn't learn first. And once I did learn that was the crux of my improvement.
Right.
Because I was suddenly able to look at it and figure out what was wrong and what I wanted to be right, and look at the art of other people and then say, oh, these are all of the aspects of their work that were previously intangible, and I couldn't figure out what I liked so much about it. But now I can incorporate it into.
Now I know what to steal.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. I love that, and I think it sucks that for a lot of people, their art improvement is bottlenecked by their analytical skill, by just the fact that maybe their artistic eye isn't trained to the point. If you think about it, it's a lifelong skill because it's the one that allows for self-diagnosis. So if you can always check in with yourself and know when and where and how to improve, it's huge. And like, it's no surprise that like from observational drawing, you move on to like the second most important thing, which is like not reading shapes and lines to make a figurative structure looking thing. It's reading values. But yeah, like I just wanted to bring that up because I want people to know that the classical curriculum has a rhyme and reason to it being in that progression order, is that it makes learning easier, and this is how Renaissance ateliers did it. It's the only thing we have to be considered time-tested, tried and true. There isn't a lot of R&D, learning, teaching, research done in how to get good at art. Hard thing to study, harder yet to fund, I bet.
I would imagine.
Yeah. So all we got is, as far as, data as to what works consistently on how to get good, is this classical thing. I just wanted to go off and introduce classicism in the art context real quick there.
For sure.
But in terms of value, I think me and Celestia talked about this a lot walking through the school, but just like the community, having common ground for a community is super important. Having space for a community is super important. Being in a community allows for you to have your plus minus equals, like having, this is like a UFC concept, but having a plus, a minus, and an equal, having someone just one step ahead of you and having someone just one step behind you for you to teach or mentor, right? And having one person who is your equal.
I would imagine that's really, really, really helpful in terms of like actually quantifying your own growth as an artist. artists too, because I know a lot of people, myself included, struggle with being able to look at your art and see how much you've improved, and then set a course for how much you want to improve and actually be able to quantify what that would look like for you. And I imagine having that like peer review system would be a really good way of validating that almost, and being able to measure it.
It's a cool thing too that if everyone adopted this plus minus equal system, then everyone would have a mentor, everyone would have, you know, a student, like, and everyone would have a rival, you know, and you're encouraged from all three angles. What did you say?
The Gary.
The Garys, yeah, Gary Oak.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, and it's so much easier. Yes, you can do that online, but it's so much easier to do it in person with a group of people that you're seeing every day for 8 hours a day for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
This is an important one. Sorry guys, I'm just reading my point form notes here. I wanted to give people value, so I wanted to put down some stuff you might have not heard. Okay, so having reference points for how artists grow and progress and learn over, people want to call their art school years the art formative years. Let's not call it that. I don't think your art formative years are your art school years. But if you're with a group of people for 5 years, the same group of people for 5 years, you will have like so many data points of how other people have learned, what they do, how their styles have changed. You know, that was super important for me when I was teaching, but what are the merits of that for like just the practicing artist?
I don't know. I mean, I think with art, it's almost... There's so many points in your journey of improving as an artist that sometimes it'll feel like you're not improving at all, when in reality your understanding of art can very much be growing in the background without it actually seeming to be reflected in your work that much. Because I mean, the improvement that I've seen in my own work over the past 2 years has been exponential, but now the improvement that I see between my existing pieces is smaller, because the amount of improvement that goes on behind the scenes is more valuable. So in my perspective here, I think it would be really validating to just see that almost quantifiable proof that because art is not a linear journey of improvement, others are also having that exact same thing. And it's not just you that seems to have plateaued or reached these different points in ways that are not necessarily as clear and clean cut as you'd like them to be. Like, it'd be great if you could have a list of milestones to hit throughout your art career or your art journey, where it's like, okay, yeah, I reached this checkpoint. I can save now and keep going. I've improved just enough to be proud of myself, but it's not like that. And sometimes it can feel really demotivated. I don't think that's a word, but we're gonna say it anyway. It can feel very demotivating.
It demotivates
now I can't even say the word at all. But it can feel very demotivating to look at your work and not be able to see quantifiable improvement. So to see it throughout other artists and see them struggling with the same thing along the same timeline, I feel like has a lot of value.
And well, when you messaged me, like you said, nebulous, like navigating a nebulous space, it's absolutely a nebulous space if you don't do the research. And like a lot of things, people are counting on you not doing the research to make money off of you.
Exactly.
What that means then is that doing a little bit of research can make you a lot of money, or at least give you a lot of what would have been value to the money that you spent. So doing the research is totally worth it. Deep diving on forums, you'll come across some really crazy stuff. You'll come across some really useful resources, some timeless resources at that. Like navigating a nebulous space, there's just a fog of war. You have no idea where you're going. You may run into a corner, you feel the corner, you go around, you don't know if you should be going around the corner. You try it anyway, but it's the same navigation of that same nebulous space. We were all incredibly inclined for art improvement. We wanted to get good. Guys, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm trying to talk like a smart person over here.
We're not smart people here.
It's like I tried to trick you first into thinking I'm a teacher or some shit, but no, I'm still learning just like you. Okay, you never know as a student, even in art school, we never knew what we were doing, if we were going the right way. We were spamming techniques in the dark and seeing what sticks. So that nebulosity is there, even in an institution with like practitioners and educators. But what's different is that you're not alone. I think that's huge.
The solidarity there.
I know. What else is valuable about art school? Well, I hate to say it, but 3 years later, the humanities are pretty cool. But once again, you don't need to pay $600 a class to read 4 books. You can go and find those 4 books online, probably on Google Books for free or something, I don't know, or some other place, you know?
In terms of the humanities, just because I feel like my audience is pretty varied in terms of what they actually have personal experience with. Could you go over what the humanities actually look like in terms of learning for people that aren't familiar?
Oh, dude, it's so random, but it's just interesting stuff. It's just like any weird soft art skills. So I took a lot of classes called story. One, the teacher was awesome, and there was very little homework. So it was like, whoa, that's the
That's a
double-double.
win right there.
That's a double-double.
Oh, hell yeah.
Maybe, you know what, that was just worth it alone, just for me and where I went with teaching, just to see this guy teach. It's very inspiring, but I can only say that like mostly after the fact. If you're a frustrated student trying to get good at art, in the moment, it's very hard to it's hard to get out of your head, enjoy class, and learn and be present when you have 17 other things to do, and you feel threatened by the school dropping your scholarship, or you showing up late a third day and them kicking you out of the program, if that's a rule there, because they can make a rule out of anything, so it's kind of strange.
That's terrifying.
And yeah, and like, you know, have fun learning, right? Like that's how we learn, under intense, scrutinizing, soul-wrenching despair.
Yeah.
Best time to learn, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, that does bring me to another question. Did you find that the environment of art school was conducive to creativity, or do you find that it crushed it, to put it bluntly? Like, I know today when we looked through the school, there were aspects like the community areas that seemed like they would be really conducive to creativity, but then we took a look at the actual classrooms, and that did not seem to be conducive to creativity. Do you feel...
let me see if I can answer without looking at my notes and form an original thought for once in my life. That's true. That's true. I don't want to look off. I don't want to cheat off of this kid's notes, though.
Oh, this kid, yeah, for
being
sure.
Me, my
for
own
sure.
notes. Creatively, I'm just trying to think of I'm trying to speak to just more of like the pure experience of just us walking around, looking at stuff. Was it conducive to you? How do you feel as an outsider, as a third party?
I feel like if I were in different circumstances, it could be. Like, I'm someone who wouldn't, if I went to art school, I wouldn't stay on campus. I would be living in my home. So I feel like for me, it would be, I go in, I go to class, I go home. And based on that alone, I would say, like, looking at those classrooms and the way that things are taught, no, it's not at all conducive to creativity. In fact, it's less conducive than if I were doing an online course in my home. But like looking at the common areas, if I were someone who lived on campus and I was like fully immersed in that lifestyle, I feel like it really could be, because the common areas are clearly so made for artists to use all of those resources and build connections within each other, and then sort of bolster each other with our creativity as a collective. Almost, I hit that with my ring. It's fine. I can't edit that out, especially now that I've acknowledged it. This is just the way it is. But I feel like if you immerse yourself completely in that environment, it could be conducive to creativity simply because of the community aspect. But the classroom side doesn't strike me as enough in and of itself. In fact, I would see it more as a deterrent.
To be specific, Celeste, you saw a few classes in session, classes from my side of the school's program, which was like design, illustration, character design, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, just kind of people sitting around in a room
in the dark.
We spent so long at the school, but like that's your direct experience.
Yeah, it was very valuable.
You to have that direct,
I appreciated that a lot, yeah.
That means more than like reading my point form bullshit, right?
That's fair. I mean, we could wrap this up here, and then this is the art process. So as the art process goes, it has been interrupted. That's an inevitability. So we are going to have to conclude the back and forth dialogue section a little bit early here, but James will be continuing to give us his wisdom and his insights in a more question and answer format.
Don't you leave, I'm not done with you.
Yeah, no, you aren't free yet. We have more. You can't leave.
There's a lot more art to talk about, a lot more content.
Exactly. So please bear with me. We'll cut to that next. This is when the real world decided to break us out of our bubble of art-related gushing. So from here on out, the interview will continue in a more direct question and answer format, as I mentioned earlier. Because James will be reading both the questions and answers himself, I'll just go ahead and leave that to him and spare you guys from my voice for a blissful hour or two.
Was the most valuable part of art school for you? And one thing I'd like to add is that being in a creative community, but also being in a creative learning community is huge in how that affects you because now you're immersed in a certain type of culture. You're immersed wholly in a learning culture. You're more incentivized to be learning. You'll have more opportunities to get new ideas because you're in the community, and you're more likely to get feedback, and you're more likely to want to kind of fit into the community too, by ways of also being learning and being up to pace. That kind of goes into the question right after, which was what was least valuable about art school. And you know, that in of itself is so cool, being part of a learning culture, but it can get the other edge to that blade when you start to have unique ideas about how you want to learn or how you think things should be done. It is very hard to go against the grain of the tribe and the culture. So that's sometimes a problem. If you have issues with the way that things are being taught, or the ways that the people have kind of programmed your learning specifically, and by the way, that is a learning program that you have to adhere to, or else what, you're not gonna do your homework, then they just kick you out. So you have to do it, whether or not you can trick yourself into thinking that it matters, or if you can have the self-confidence and skill. It does take skill to just phone it in and do the bare minimum to get like a passing grade on the assignment. There's still a lot of like emotional anxiety and a lot of like just, I think, creative leakage that happens because of all this consideration and decision making that a person has to do, instead of just making a piece that they like, spending the work mileage and the emotional mileage that it would cost to do that other thing. Instead, you can just make art. You can just make art for fun, and even if you got nothing out of it, it might have been more than if you'd done an assignment that you like is just irrelevant for you, your career, or your goals as an artist. And the thing to keep in mind is that at some point you will realize that most students being too close to the tribe is sometimes dangerous, because the tribe is sticky, and just being part of that kind of groupthink thing is tricky, because most students don't see a lot of improvement out of art school, in my opinion, and not enough for the 5 years worth. So you can see my stuff on Instagram. If you look up Circle Brush, you can take the last post and like go back 5 years or something. I think like just go 2018 and go 5 years back, 2018, 2019. I would say that like, though I was almost satisfied with my growth, like not quite, I was, whatever that looks like to you, is kind of on like the upper end, like top 80 top 80 percentile. Like I'm in like the upper 80% of like most improved people. I do think my case was a bit different too for improvement, because I did start doing my assignments differently. Like I just did them the night before so that I'd have time to just do whatever I want otherwise. And that again is a personal thing, because I thought it was pretty obvious that our assignments just like were not helping us. Like the 30 hours you'd have to sink into like assignment X, Y, and Z is better off with you finding some way to divvy that up and to scrounge an extra 10-15 hours out and just do some other form of training completely for yourself, or to like even sleep would be a good investment, because you're a student, you need that, you're learning, and most students don't have that. So you'd be getting like a biological advantage. It's kind of weird, but most people would sacrifice sleep first. I get it. Next question. What was the least valuable part of art school for you? Yeah, I think it is the time and emotional commitment, because it does demand such, and it also demands such in like subconscious ways. Like I said, once you're part of, you know, the student group now, consciously or not, you'll start to care about things everyone else kind of cares about, and it does take some awareness to like even have the courage to kind of stand, and I don't know, just like stand your ground on certain practices, especially if they're education-based practices. Like, I don't think this is the best way for me to do this X, Y, or Z to get better. If you have another idea for getting good, you really do owe it for yourself to go and try that thing. One, you have the initiative, you're gonna focus on it and try harder and be more engaged in your assignments. And I think that's a bigger problem than we realize, just the fact that a school can have an incredibly rigid learning plan or instructional design, curriculum, whatever you want to call it, or it can be like a progression system, or like the lack thereof, abiding to any logic, rhyme, or reason in having a progression system. The fact that it commits you to this very specific art school learning program means it also closes the doors. And I do think, like, even though you get to go home, yeah, I do think it closes a lot of doors for your independent learning. And like, that's a skill that you'll take with you for the rest of your life and for the rest of your practice, is like just learning how to learn on your own. alone. That's a problem in my opinion because the time commitment to be at school usually is just too much. Like if you kind of get bad looks for like trying to leave class early, or eventually the teacher will like talk to you about leaving class early. Again, from my personal experiences, but I think oftentimes you'll find that as a student, you'll just be in your classroom working most of the time. And when it's all digital, some days it's hard to justify putting pants on to get out of bed, to go to class, to sit there to work when I could have just got up and turned on the computer and worked. So the opportunity cost of having to commit to a full-time learning program, I think, is very steep because it does close off a lot of self-initiative projects. And I think it's always just giving you a great excuse to not do something you want because you have to do school first. Well, because you paid for it. Well, also because they have your flame to your degree now. If you back out, you get nothing. So it's just it's a strange situation to be in. I also think that the expectation of real world experience from art school might not be as valuable as most people think, just because if you think about it, like the industry is the industry, and art schools at best they can keep pace because they aren't the industry. But are art schools keeping pace? Well, only very specific art schools, in my opinion, the ones that are like in the hotbed of the industry, like Art Center in California, around Hollywood, right? They have all the resources of the industry physically in place. In fact, they might just be a spot inside the web of the industry. So the claim of real world experience can come with this asterisk that the institution might be will probably be a couple of years behind on the industry at best, and that's it keeping pace with the industry, right? That's the best case scenario. What also happens is you get contract instructors from the industry and they'll just kind of teach their one class. And that's the opposite situation where they'll basically just give you the lowdown on everything. Unfortunately, I wouldn't bet on every teacher being a contract industry teacher if that is what you need. Oftentimes we don't get the choice, or if you do, it'll be between 2 or 3 people. You as an individual artist, you're able to email any of these industry professionals. We did that and we were talking over our hit rates, and our response rate was about 60%. Mine was about 60%. Most people responded. You can email these people about anything and just write a thoughtful email and keep trying. It's mostly a numbers game. And honestly, I think any contractor teacher, any industry teacher who's doing just just their one class at the school, they're already interested in helping students. I do not think that I expect any student to forgo a $50,000 price tag just to be able to have them answer a student's questions. I don't think any instructor, I don't know, am I maybe I'm dreaming here, but I'd imagine that if there was a particular teacher and you couldn't get in their class, you could probably email them. I think it's honestly fine. And if you're on the outside and you're not even in the school, I honestly think it might be worth a shot just to email some people and message them. We were able to get a lot of responses. We already know that these people are interested in helping students. So what else do I feel wasn't valuable in art school for me? I don't think the product deliverables, the education deliverables are valuable. This is the how to get good at art stuff, because most of this is already on the internet. You can basically learn art on YouTube, and that's honestly what I did when I started to play around with phoning in some my projects to give me more time to do independent studies. Yeah, I'd always come to YouTube first. We got it figured out. It's all here and it's just growing. It's a virtuous cycle. It's an upward and outwardly spiraling tornado of content, and everyone's kind of competing to make more engaging content that's more effective in the art space. So it's we're all competing to get you good at art faster on YouTube. I also know that's a very optimistic view of all the art content on YouTube. And with that optimism, I think I'm optimistic because it's all free. And there's really no commitment. You can stop the video at any time. You can stop this video at any time. Don't do it though. It's an open and accessible and more flexible learning structure. Easily fits into people's lives. If there ever could be a one-size-fits-all curriculum for people, it might be just getting into the YouTube art education education algorithm. It'll eventually take you somewhere. I also think that the stuff they tell you to buy in art school is mostly useless. Like some classes you have to go out and buy technical pens and French curves and certain types of rulers, along with like the textbook that you guys won't read. They're little purchases, but they all do add up, and especially in first year, because they know you're first year students, and it's easy to be really pushy because you're in a new place and you're kind of scared and you think you're on eggshells. They just tell you to buy more stuff, so you go out and buy like the highest grade paints because they tell you to buy it. I don't think that's necessary. I think to the art learner, even to the layman's eye, most Walmart paints would be fine to learn art, learn painting, learn color, and more importantly, it's just more dispensable, so you're just less precious with it. Like you'll be okay to get messy, and you'll be okay to experiment, and you'll be okay to fail when it's like $10 paints. $10 for the paint pack, I should clarify. So I don't like that they tell you to buy a lot of this stuff, because the reality is that most professional artists, me and Celestia, we were talking about what Artist 2 looks like, because we're already here at DALL-E 2. It's time for Artist 2, and Artist 2 is mostly a digital artist. On their deliverables and on their process, there will always be a digital component. I think a lot of the supplies, a lot of the design supplies, I didn't really use. And the thing with buying technology though is that you can always sell it after, which is a consideration, especially if paying tuition with your own money or whatever, especially because money's tight. So tablets and tablet monitors, other art gadgets usually have some resale value, whereas like kind of paints and brushes, canvases, rulers and stuff, pens, and typically you probably won't sell it. And my last point, which isn't really fair, is that I think it's strange that art school doesn't have art therapy, that art therapy isn't a larger component to the education. Like if you think about most artists, there is no manual on how the muse works, how creativity works. Most people don't have a creative theory. Most people only understand their relationship with their art only at the surface level, that they've known it all their life. I think there's huge value in having an art counseling psychology professional working with the students in group sessions, in workshops, or even just having a contractor in an office for students to go to that's not just a counselor but is like an art therapist. I think we've been long overdue for that, and I think students are kind of being shorted. There is no mention or attempt at that incredibly useful and interesting side of things called art therapy. Yeah, just because like, artists got problems, man. Artists got art problems, and sometimes just a regular counselor might not do it for you. Who do we go to when we talk about our art problems? If we could solve our own art problems, they wouldn't be problems, right? Having more awareness, having more artist awareness, which is what I feel like the biggest benefit of art therapy is, this expanding of your artist awareness. That's huge, and how could you say that's not useful? A useful soft skill for any artist or art student. That should definitely be a part of the curriculum. And this isn't something that you'd learn from just like doing homework and writing essays. This is something that you learn with a professional who is specifically trained in this, not say like a painting instructor or the typography instructor. I think you shouldn't expect to learn like specific soft skills like how to be a better speaker, how to be more confident in yourself, art confidence, creative confidence, self-awareness. You will not learn those things from your studio classes, from the art instructors. It is wrong to assume that. People who you see thriving in art school already came in with those skills, generally speaking. And if you wanted to specifically develop those soft skills, then it's like practicing for anything else, where you have to train in specificity. If you want to learn a new party trick, you can't throw a ball at a wall and try and parse out the similar movements that you'd be doing with the other thing. No, you have to just do it. Just learn the party trick. Just keep on doing it with the thing you're gonna use until it works, until you figure it out. You have to be in context and in specificity. So, especially for something like art therapy, talking about these softer sides of the artist's awareness and creative confidence and stuff, you have to do just that. And that's not something that will necessarily happen in printmaking class or during your art history lecture. I would not expect that at all. A lot of students come out of of art school really, just I'd say generally the same amount of socialized as they came in for. And what difference they did notice is a temporal growth, like just due to the fact that you've been in here for 5 years and that you're going to change as a person. So yeah, maybe you got a little bit better at speaking. You feel a little bit more confident now that you have a degree, and you can tell people that you have a degree. Was the environment itself positive, conducive to creativity? Yes, it is very positive. We saw some really cool stuff. They're really interesting little interactive galleries, interesting little like zine shelf thing, interesting little like fabric maze displays. What was weird is that as we were going higher and higher up into the building, climbing the Avery Tower in a sense, things got like more boring. So by the time we were on like the top floor, it was actually just like incredibly bland. It was incredibly bland. There's not much going on. Not much going on in the hallways, not much going on in the empty classrooms. And as Celestia observed, there was not much going on actively in filled classrooms either. There is a lot of creative space, but the creativity is more the vibe, dude. It's more about the students. It's more about the fact that the students are all together. I think creative environment, more of a B rank advantage, of a second class advantage. First class advantage would just be like you being a creative person, you exploring the nature of how you view your own personal, raw, organic creativity. And that's work that you have to do, and that's stuff that like you have to investigate that no one else can do for you. But it's a first class advantage because it'll work in every situation. Having to go to school to feel creative, it might be what you need right now. It's hard to count on it for the rest of your life. So art school is conducive to creativity, but I also, having been on both the fine arts and design side of things, I can also see that really backfiring. So the fine arts students, they really don't have a lot of homework, typically speaking. Like there's a way to not do a lot of homework if you don't want to and be like totally fine, which is just like to be more conceptual, and like that's totally fine. So I do think the fine arts students here had a bit more control over how much they could take a departure off of their lesser so training plan, because it's not a training program, more of their like a guided exploration program, was my impression of the biggest difference for how fine arts drawing, painting, media was doing their thing. So the school is a very creative place, and that's because of the students. But that also depends on your workload and whether or not you're able to spare the study time to work on just a weird passion project put up somewhere inside the school. And the thing is, for any of these projects, really, you don't need a school for them. It's just more fun when they're all collected in the same general area. You see really interesting downtown and even in the suburbs sometime. But the biggest difference is, and this is the thing that we'll keep coming back to, right, is the fact that you're doing it with your friends now. You're doing it with your friends because they're all at school. They're doing it with your art friends, your peers, your art colleagues, your collaborators, your critics, whatever. You're doing it in a system where you do get feedback and communication with that community. And it's really hard to say to an individual learner that yes, you can do weird creative little projects at any time that you want, just like anyone else, really, if they don't have the restrictions. But you're not gonna have kind of the satisfaction of contributing to a community in the same sense, in the same immediate sense. It's really hard telling an independent learner how they're able to maybe like get that community feeling from being outside the student community. That's hard. I feel like deep down, though it shouldn't be, that is what is at the crux of most people's art school decision, is this like community aspect, because it is really hard to find that elsewhere. It is really hard to concentrate that anywhere to begin with. The other double edge of being in a more rigid program, like on the design side of things, is that eventually you might think it's cool to just stay in your class all day. And that's just what we did because of, stress and the psychology and the head game there. But it is unfortunate because it's really easy to fall into that trap. I do think it's a trap to stay in your class all day, and then your creative environment kind of gets squandered. I would say half the time, halfway through, I kind of like I really wanted to just get good, and I didn't do anything like fun, really. I didn't see a lot of interesting student art in the galleries or go to all the art talks and stuff. I just kind of sat in my class and tried to get good like everyone else was doing, because I understand it's it's difficult and scary to do the opposite thing, what everyone else is doing. Just as you watching the video right now might feel some insecurity from doing what is culturally the opposite thing, which is learning art not in art school, figuring stuff out on your own. The irony of that is that maybe if we go back a generation and then we go back another generation, that's exactly what they were doing too, figuring things on their own. Maybe it's not so different. Maybe it's not so socially alienating to think that you might want to learn something on your own instead of going to the place that everyone else goes to get it, especially because the more professional artists that you will run into, if you are going out talking to these people and asking good questions, you'll realize obviously that being a professional artist is not glamorous, right? And you'll also realize that most of them have day jobs, and you'll also realize that a lot of them, and probably most of them, didn't go to art school either. It's honestly really difficult to look at art students and make predictions about where they'll go or where they'll be because it's such a volatile market. So instead, I think you're just better off kind of getting the data by working backwards, just going where, you know, the professional artists are doing their thing and asking questions. That might be at the anime conventions, that might be just through DMs on Twitch and Instagram, or it might be through hitting up, or you might be hitting them up in Zuck's metaverse, who knows? And to provide another counterpoint to the creative environment is to illustrate once again how that can be kind of dangerous as I've experienced it, especially being in an art institution. It's very the setting itself has a particular philosophy of learning, right? Obviously you learn going to school and doing what we tell you to do and stuff, or something like that. There's some messaging there. So eventually people get the impression that like this is the way to do things, and it becomes an incestuous echo chamber of these art education ideas, or of learning philosophy, or of just bigger picture art, bigger picture self, bigger picture learn society things. A lot of these ideas just kind of echo on and on until it becomes programming for you. In that sense, it kind of takes away someone's initiative to question the way that they're learning things, to question both teaching and learning, to make things both better for themselves and for others coming through. It also just, again, this is just due in part to the commitment of a full-time student lifestyle and schedule and workload and whatever, is the idea that there's a certain particular way that you should maybe live too, and that might be difficult because whereas everyone's getting 4 to 6 hours of sleep, you might be one who needs 9. You might be doing that because everyone else is. You might just even try it because everyone else is, or you might want to do something else but not everyone else is, especially because we talked about how much of like a stranglehold art schools have on young artist community. I understand that it's especially difficult to do anything against the grain of that community because there's seemingly no other option, no other community. And just as much as you want to stand out, you also want to fit in. It's the irony of being an artist, you know, and everyone has a different hairstyle, so everyone fits in by having the same different hairstyle or something like that. You know, it's like some sort of artistic short circuiting going on when we have too many of the same somethings in the same place, which kind of goes against the idea of being unique and taking some risks and being explorative and curious about some really big stuff to an artist, especially how I learn, how I make art, and what the industry's like. To sum all of that up in a phrase, creativity, yes. Authenticity, maybe no. And I know it's hard for a young artist to think that they might be just making stuff that they don't honestly want to make for a long time, like 5 years, for the sake of getting better. Like, it's definitely asking for a lot of blind faith. And I really feel like a lot of people who are interested in learning art have this problem where just by nature, cool art and art education, as these two domains are very, very separate from each other on the internet, it's not as easy to catch up to the art education discussion and current discourse as it is to just like find cool art, see cool art, and be like, damn, I want to learn art, and to just think that it's black magic or something. Next question. Some artists who already have professional careers in art are interested in attending art school, but are concerned that they won't have time to maintain their career alongside it. Based on the amount of time your coursework occupied, would you say that they would have enough time for both? Unfortunately, I don't think you'll have time for both. I think that you can make it work, but I don't think it's in your best interest to make it work because you're going to make sacrifices for one or the other. And if you have a system that's working for you now as a professional artist, then your responsibility should be more to like keep that factory running, or to be like upgrading your factory, streamlining your pipeline, making more money, finding ways to be more fulfilled, stuff like that, like professional artist stuff, not student artist stuff. Art school's a very compound discussion, so there's a lot of things that you could be wanting to get out of art school aside from just improvement. It might help to try and compartmentalize what you want out of art school, like sit down, think about it, do some writing, and see if there is a way to get specifically what you want a la carte, you know, just in one-off purchases, one-off individual purchases. And I understand that that's very difficult because the art education product of art school is a whole package thing. Like, no, we need 5 years of your life and 50K. I use 5 years as just a rounder number instead of 4. I know most of these degrees are 4-year degrees, and it gets weird when the discussion goes international. But 5 is general, and 5 is safe, and 5 is round. And also because if you mess up once, you're gonna have to do like 5 years. Like, you're gonna graduate like in year 5. So like if you mess up once, or you fail at like a class or something, or if you don't get into a class, or if they move you into like a separate credit class or something because the class you wanted was full, and you and the other group of kids who always have the lowest GPAs are just like always seeing each other in like these other random classes because you're just, you know, you're at the bottom of the GPA list and you're the first ones to get moved, so you're kind of like second class students for having less of a GPA or something like that. It's kind of weird. You want to try your best to see if there's any way you can get the thing that you want out of art school just on its own, and that'll probably unfortunately not be at art school because art school, you know, likes to sell it all as a whole package. I completely understand that there's a FOMO, fear of missing out, to have just moved ahead in your career without having pivotal milestone experiences, these seemingly pivotal milestone experiences, these rose-tinted experiences, as anime would tell us, of the college life, and even more so the art college life, right? But I still think, you know, first of all, we know that, like, you know, the cultural image of what that is mostly untrue. You'll have like a few cool moments. Everyone's got cool art school stories, and everyone's got art school horror stories just as much. You may feel like you're missing out on an experience, and it's just one of these things where I think for the artist's best interest, somewhere at some point in time just had to have made a decision, and that person was you, right? And you decided professional art, and now it is professional artist. You are now a professional artist, and someone else decided art school, and so now they went the art school path. There's too much of an opportunity cost for you to reconsider that art school path, in my opinion, because by the time that you're done, someone else could have doubled their business, so now you're being left behind. And not that it's all about just competing and growing, but I'm talking about growth potential, because if you were to think about just having, like, cutting in half the amount of time and labor effort that you're putting into your art business for the sake of going to school, I think more often than not, just there's going to be so much creative leakage trying to do two things well and trying to make the most out of these two things. The romanticism of art school does fade off. It does fade off in about like the first month. That'll be rejuvenated when you get into like your major program, like the School of Design or whatever, and you're like, oh, and just all the same, the romance will be gone by the first month. It'll be very clear how things are, how things go, and that at the end of the day, you have to just kind of put in the time and do the assignments. The bulk of your student efforts will be into put in the time to do the assignments, which might not be the best use of a student's learning hours. I know it's easy to consider, and from the other side, someone may say, hey, isn't the point to end up right exactly where you are right now, working as a professional artist? And that's true, and I would also take your side in that discussion and say, how much of like an artist's life is hung up on like having artistic experiences and living a creative life, and how much of what we imagine are artistic experiences and creative moments and milestones, how much of those things are art school things in our mind. And I think for a lot of us, we have an idea that an artistic life, a creative life, is made up of art school moments and memories and vignettes, and that is very romantic thinking. Though I've had a lot of cool stories and cool experiences from art school, largely, I think living creatively, living artistically still accounts and encompasses the rest of your life too. I just think sometimes for a lot of people, art school is handicapping in some ways, if not just for the dead alone. this is in the majority cases of people who want to either just get good at art or work as a professional artist, and not for a group of people who specifically need a degree. And if it was that way, I would say look into design degrees, because we have like kind of a cultural, our unspoken cultural narrative is that fine art bachelor's degrees are kind of bottom of the barrel. We're not quite sure how we feel about design. I'd imagine it's at least a half step up from fine arts. Kind of like MBAs and Masters of Educations are a dime a dozen in the master's game. We can pick kind of just like the slightly higher tier. So design degrees, if you need a degree, and like the art thing is like, there are also online design degrees. There's one offered in Canada, and there's probably a lot in the States. So I would look into that first because of the flexibility that it affords you. Again, if you just need the degree. I know it's hard to see through the cultural marketing, you know, that like that art thing of artistic life and artist's life and what artist one looks like, but you've kind of proven the theory already that you just go and do art and you figure it out as you go, and you learn one thing when it's time, and you learn the next thing when you got to learn the next thing, and you slowly improve at your art just as you slowly improve at your business, just as you slowly improve your art spirit, just as you slowly improve, just like anything else in life. It just needs to take the time. It needs to take the time, but also needs to take the time to synergize and stew with all those other useful artist 2 skills, like learning how to learn, learning to be resourceful, learning to be confident as a learner, like having the audacity to just email a bunch of people for advice, and other stuff isn't being taught, and quite honestly can't really be taught in art school. But what about the cool artist bohemian lifestyle? Okay, what about a bunch of cool artists sitting around in their sick art drip, smoking blunts, listening to vinyl, talking about government bad, you know? Again, that's just a very romantic image of the cool artist bohemian lifestyle, and with that lifestyle comes the sacrifice of using your time to do that and not the other thing, which is like getting good at art. And who's not to say that one person in that room can't just be like an outsider, can't just be like friends of the people, and is not in art school but is completely immersed, is a fixture of that lifestyle if you want it, just purely by being friends with these groups of people or having a party at his place. Once again, it takes a lot of time and effort to get to the point of being that person that can be social dynamically fluid to get something like that happening. But the work there that it takes, the individual work that it takes to become that more social, dynamically fluid person is an artist 2 skill, is something that I think newer artists will have to learn. This is how you find new opportunities now. New opportunities are coming up in markets that don't even realize they have opportunities. So the role of the professional independent artist will also be more of a communication and human-centered role, I think. I think that the opportunities that are opening up for like artists 2 will also involve more of these like human skills. Not that artists aren't humans. I know they're all dead inside. It's really hard. Another thing to consider is that you really can't afford the time commitment of these fluff classes. Like there are classes that will teach you skills not immediately relevant to your business, and you will know what that is pretty soon. You like by the 3rd week, by the 3rd class basically. But you still have to commit to the assignments of that class and to do the bare minimum of that workload, which still might come out to like, I don't know, 10 hours a week or something like that. And it's a problem now for a professional, because you can put a dollar price to your hours now. In fact, the market has decided on a dollar price to what your work hour is now. And for you to trade your work hour as an assignment hour to do an assignment that doesn't directly benefit your practice is kind of, in a sense, just I really do think that the mind of a professional artist is going to be running these quick maths in their head constantly. I think they're going to be very disappointed with the typical course loadout, man. I think it's going to be a lot of stuff that doesn't directly affect you, and for that point alone, you will be more frustrated by it. And like we said, professional artists, you know, even just from that, like the one podcast, the figures they were giving were 5%, 10%, and someone was 20%, which is the percent of things that they learned in art school useful to them in their art practice today as professionals? 5, 10, and up to 20%. Next question, were you taught anything about how to use your skills professionally after completing your degree, i.e. networking, portfolio building types of work, and how to apply for it, etc.? The short answer is no. The mid answer is somewhat, but there are many unsightly aspects of the industry that get exposed if you're taught too much about it. Just like, especially recently, the fact on DALL-E 2, how do we talk about that to a group of students going for production design or going for illustration design? That market is going to see like an 80% shrinkage because it's just going to be art directors like throwing prompts now, right? Or they're going to be hiring writers who can come up with better prompts, and you just need one dude. A dude can write fast all day. So I think this is an interesting question because we also have to ask, is it in a school's best interest to be telling you honestly what the market looks like after your degree, especially in art when usually we don't have a lot of nice things to say. It's really hard to sell the art market. It's really hard to sell someone on spending their time and money on developing these incredibly specific mileage dependent skills to enter a market that's not really gonna treat them well or reward them and compensate them properly for the amount of work it took to learn these skills. And by the way, when people ask me how long it takes to like get good at art, I usually just say 4 years full time. Like if you want to go from square zero to being able to do most art jobs, 4 years full time but that's on the classical curriculum. And again, who can carve out all that time? Who can get that specific instruction? Well, you can kind of get it online now, right? And also, who has the discipline to do that without the dark motivation, without the negative motivation of shit, I just paid all this money and they're holding a flame to my degree. To be honest, I was mostly okay that we weren't learning so much about the industry because once again, it was very apparent who was and who wasn't connected to the industry, and anything you needed to find out about what's going on outside, you can just kind of email someone with a pretty high, just email a few people, you'll have responses. And in terms of using our skills professionally after completing your degree, like I said, that's tough because for someone to give you an honest explanation of the market is actually just making it sound really unsightly and actually kind of a bit demotivating and just kind of not the right kind of business high you want your fourth year students to be graduating and ending their student career on and beginning their artistic career on, despite it being the truth though, you know? So this whole thing of just the unsightly aspects of the industry that get exposed when we talk too much or say too much about what you should be doing, what you, the students, should be doing, and how to use your skills specifically after the degree. If we talk about it too much, you know, kind of makes it look bad. It's kind of the truth. It is kind of just like a very volatile place, art market that is. And it's also difficult to say because entertainment industry is kind of one of these things where, and depending on what niche of the art industry you're going for, there are just hotbeds in that there are these high concentrations of the industries in a very small geographic location. So unless you're within the geography of the industry, sometimes just straight up, even if they did want to give you specific useful advice, just due to the fact that they are detached from the immediate web of the industry, the immediate like physical web of the industry, because of that, it's sometimes tough to give honest, up-to-date directions. Like I said, schools aren't at the pace of the industry. There's no guarantee that what they're telling you to do will be accurate or will be accurate by the time you graduate or by the time you get good enough after you've practiced after graduating to apply. Things can flip on a dime. The industry can change overnight. It's hard to give standard advice. But in general, if I were to be asked what we were given, I'd just say nothing specific. Next question. Based on what you learned in art school, would you say that most or all of it could be learned through self-study and online education? If not, what aspects do you feel that an artist can only learn in art school? So there's a lot of hidden experiences in the art school process that might supplement the art learning process just as much as harming it. So this is just kind of due to the fact that you're living your life as a human being for 5 years. You will fluke into circumstances that might help you realize something new or try something new about learning that will progress your learning noticeably, just as there are many things that may suppress your learning, cause you to make tough choices and tough sacrifices because of the amount of things you're trying to do at once make you make choices that do harm your learning instead. Generally speaking, what I learned in art school can you get online. In terms of the education content, it's all online for free, and it's all online as long as you're willing to put in the work to look for it. You can get it for cheap, and you can also get it for free. Most pieces of useful art learning content you can definitely get for free, just due to the sheer volume of, you know, people teaching fundamentals. And the problem with that is that you, as the independent learner, as artist 2, you have to spend the time and the mental legwork to sift through the bullshit. There's a lot of I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that might make you feel like they're more here to sell you their course than to actually just give you what they promised to give you in the title or thumbnail, and you got to do with that, and that takes, you know, some creative stamina out of you. You've found a few duds in content, but also I think that for artists 2, that having a bullshit detector is really useful, just for anyone in general, but especially for a self-learner. The better you are at being able to discern what is a useful or unuseful tutorial or lecture, or what about a particular learning experience that will help or harm you, knowing that a certain personality type works for you and another one doesn't, is huge. And these singular, seemingly separate factoids of self-awareness, they all add up together in making you better artists too, because you're gonna have to do it all and more of it on your own or something. It's especially important for a person entering the economy of the world we live in today to have a good bullshit detector, to spend the time to develop their bullshit detector, because everyone's like selling them something. Everyone's trying to sell you something, bro. Especially students, especially art students. The YouTube space, you know, the other edge of that blade of the YouTube art education content being a virtuous cycle is that there are also more opportunities to monetize people's audiences. So it does help to be aware whether or not someone's just kind of like baiting you with the content for a course pitch, or if they're actually doing the other thing, which is earning your trust and demonstrating their expertise through free education, free quality education, to prove to you that their product and course, you know, teaching style will be also the same standard and quality. As an art student inside the institution, sometimes you get really panicky and you're trying to learn new things, so you'll just kind of buy tutorials, and also your mind is just really up and down. So sometimes just like the dope of buying education sends you on like a Gumroad spree, and that's not healthy, and that's not necessary either. Yeah, and the unfortunate thing to say about important artist 2 skills, like being more intuitive about people's motivations when it comes to education and art content, is that I think it kind of, this kind of development does get suppressed in art school, for the same reason that scrutinizing a system's, you know, you're just basically questioning the operation of a system, and the system doesn't like that. And you may find that your peers don't like that. You may find that if you speak up or try to affect change, that you will face like some degree of alienation from the tribe, where, you know, these are the good kids and that's the group of kids meeting at lunch to talk about doing, you know, this new student project XYZ, or to try and organize some form of like lunch and learn around like the new softwares we're all supposed to learn, or to have a 3D discussion about, you know, whereas you guys should be thinking about AI, for us it was thinking about 3D, like 3D software as a more conventional tool for 2D artists. And obviously the answer is, you can go either way with it, but for the industry the answer is yes. Obviously you should just learn 3D at the time, even if you're trying to be a 2D artist. And if you're someone listening and you think that's interesting, the irony of that whole thing is that now when I say that 2D artists should learn 3D, you'll never need to learn more than 1 hour of Blender for 3D to be functionally useful for 80% of 2D artists. You'll only ever have to watch 1 hour of a Blender tutorial, because once you're done with navigations and making boxes and being able to stretch boxes, well, you can just make anything out of boxes, because what you're gonna do is just use it as reference, whether you're gonna just size the structures and know that it'll look right in perspective because it's through a render engine with a lens, or if you're just gonna take a screenshot and just trace over it for your sketch layer. The 3D discussion is a negligible discussion in my opinion, because it's an hour's worth of work to do it. And every time, you don't ever have to be afraid of just losing it for not using it. Blender's free, lots of intro Blender tutorials, and by the time you're learning an hour's worth of Blender fundamentals for the third time, you may find that 10 minutes in, it's enough for you, and you can basically figure the rest out. You don't have to keep up practice with it, and you won't ever have to think about it again, because you've deliberately made a decision on just exactly how much Blender you need to know. You've learned your minimum viable product. You've learned how shitty your minimum viable product can be in 3D for it to be useful as a 2D artist. And the answer is about, like, 15-20 minutes worth of 3D learning or 3D and Blender's free, by the way, so like don't feel intimidated by it at all. You only need to learn to make boxes. I'm sure you can figure out how to make boxes and beyond with an hour's worth of tutorials. Don't be intimidated by 3D. Should you learn 3D as a 2D artist? The answer is yes, but you can just like learn it whenever you feel like it. You can learn it when you need to learn it, because you won't need to learn it for definitely not for more than an hour. So don't worry about it. Don't think about it. Just think about it when you think about it, okay? Just do it when you think about it. Think about it when you think about it, okay? Okay. Next question. Has your degree helped you find art-based career opportunities you feel you wouldn't have had access to without it? I got to teach professionally for the city, like for the local government, and that felt awesome to give back to my city and to work with the public, and to also an incredible amount of freedom and also support. So that's pretty crazy. I love that job, but it's not a sustainable job. It's like a contract job. No one's really full-time, and it's shift work. You get it based on enrollment, blah blah blah, and it suffers from all the other, even though it's a teaching job that you can get into with just a bachelor's degree, it still suffers from a lot of those other like shit sandwich things that all art jobs have. One being just low pay, obviously, instability, having you as some sort of not permanent employee, so you won't get benefits, guaranteed hours, or a guaranteed schedule. But I love that job, and I really don't have anything bad to say about it otherwise. And I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's just a property of an art job, a property of art job at the bachelor's level, and I don't imagine it being much different for most practitioners at the master's level in teaching either, because that's what you need to teach institutionally in college. But there's also kind of like a track, like sort of like some sort of tenure track or something. I hear that's average 6 years, and arts professors, like just creative and liberal arts and stuff, usually 50, 60, 70K a year in Canada. Being a contract professor, being a contract instructor for art schools also doesn't pay a lot for us here. It's once you do the math of $1,500 per class, 8 hours a class for 16 weeks. It usually comes, or 8 hours, minus the lunch break, it usually comes out to about a bit more than minimum wage. So basically minimum wage. So it sucks that a socially revered profession and craft such as teaching, and a socially revered human expression form such as art is so underfunded and underpaid and kind of underserved, all of which, it's not specifically anyone's fault, but more of systemic issues of how art schools are being done, and just the bigger picture mechanism of the game that's being played on top of schools. So no, the degree doesn't help me get other art jobs. I really don't think it matters. And when you talk to art directors, they'll straight up tell you it doesn't matter. Where it might matter is for if you need your degree to work in another country, and usually like for the States, they may need to like sponsor you. So that's another barrier to hiring, is that they need to pay extra money to sponsor your visa, and usually to sponsor it, like they might have to pay for relocation and stuff like that. So having a graphic design degree, going to work in-house at a video game company, yes, absolutely, the design degree is the one to go for if that is a specific goal for you. However, I wouldn't count on that goal, because it's just so much. Students who grew up in the hotbed of the industry, around a culture and around hotbed of art education resources, they're usually going to be further ahead, and there's usually like hiring. It's all nepotism, right? Especially because it's in-house. They need to vet this person's character. They need to know that he's gonna be one of the boys. So I think local people for in-house positions have a massive advantage, and I wouldn't count on getting a degree just for the international work visa aspect of it. But having said that, there are still, like, this is a bigger discussion, right, about like what the hell is a degree anymore, and like talk about academic inflation, how like bachelor's is not enough, but it was for our parents, and you need a master's now. And what about the students graduating high school 5 years from now? Will they need PhDs just to get through Indeed's autofilter system? Generally speaking, for the art industry, it doesn't matter. Just be good at art, and people can tell just by looking at your portfolio. However, if you're pivoting industries like I'm doing, like just going for like a day job, training for a day job in a new field, the degree is helpful because we're at that place in our culture right now in the hiring market where a lot of career and maybe corporate jobs just have bachelor's degree as a prerequisite. So if that were the case, again, I would, and like if you're trying to do 3 birds with 1 stone, it might be still maybe not worth it. Maybe 5 birds 1 stone, you know, that the extra benefits of that degree do come into play. But really consider that debt, because if you're an international student, that your tuition is just going to be triple, so you're just like paying 3 times more money for the same iPhone, and then you open it up and it's like an iPhone 6. Remember, the educational deliverable is not at pace with the industry, so it's actually like old content. We're not quite sure how to get you to do exactly what they're doing now, because we're not quite sure they're doing right now, because by the time like a movie comes out, the pre-production techniques could have just like completely changed. And obviously the industry has no obligation to keep the art school up to date with what's going on, and to give them their training manuals and their documentation, and to sign them up on their employee newsletter and stuff. Next question: how valuable is your degree to you now? It's worth as much as a degree is worth in the employment game. So I got a degree, and like I said, for those other just degree reasons, of not to be competitive, but to be more on the baseline of the job market, the degree does what it's supposed to do for me, and it's an accessory to play the game. That's fine. Another question that's interesting is whether or not the degree makes me feel like more of an artist. And the answer is no. We were talking about this, Celestia, and she had mentioned that she feels a bit more validated as an artist, having seen a more honest look art school and what is happening inside art schools. For that same reason, I feel less validated as an artist for having a degree, because I don't believe that what I did encapsulates the qualities and the skills that new artists need. I feel like the degree makes me feel like less of an artist, because, and I'm okay with this, by the way, because it makes me feel right, and feeling right feels really good. I saw a lot of my friends who took the independent art learning path, and they are professional now. And me myself, despite committing to the rigid art school learning path, and despite switching halfway to just doing the bare minimum for school and taking initiative with my independent art learning, I still didn't feel ready for the art market, despite floundering in the water to swim the right way, to take the right path, to try and make it work, walking a middle way. It still was really overwhelming to me, and it was just so much to learn all at once, and it was a tough time already, because I don't think everyone graduates art school with not necessarily a stronger, more healthy mindset, because it can break away and just kind of break down at you when you get closer and closer to this kind of deadline of when you should be good enough. And if you know that the education and the training and maybe your own discipline and health of body and mind haven't necessarily been conducive to learning, haven't been stable in getting through the assignments and course load, it still won't make it easier. It obviously doesn't make it any easier for you to be more effective as a learner, as a self-learner, to be more more initiative or to feel more creatively confident diving straight into this field or that. And again, I think that's a personal thing. This has to do with a lot of an individual's personality. Overall, from my own personal frame of reference, looking at my friends who took the self-learner path, who are professional, and looking at my own personal path of school learner path, and when I look at the difference of skills and the difference of where both of us had put our eggs in our proverbial art baskets, it becomes very evident that being in a school system is not conducive to putting the right eggs in the right baskets in becoming in the right professional art baskets. You are misallocating your effort and your time and your attention and your money. When it's this close to home, it's pretty much undeniable that you don't need a degree, and you can be a professional artist without a degree. You can get a degree, get good enough for like entry-level commercial industry standard, do the work and realize you don't like to do any of the work. You can't do any of the work, and you really can't work like this. Definitely maybe in the future, but definitely not right now. That can happen, except I want to take more ownership for it. But I have to admit, objectively, I am being nice to myself. Like even if I'm not being nice to myself, I have to admit that a huge amount of my commitment was a choice not for me to make because I made commitment to school. So I had lost a lot of control in my hours. I had lost a lot of my work hours. I now, in retrospect, were completely misallocated, putting those eggs in the school basket when I should have been putting these eggs in all the other baskets that the professional artists were putting them in, which was usually involving just getting your feet wet and taking baby steps into just making more and more money and trying new things with marketing. Baby steps though. That in parallel programming makes sense. The social media, the art development, the art pieces, the art business, these working on these in parallel makes a lot of sense. Less or so doing all the art fundamentals at once. Okay, next question. Would you do it again? The answer is no, I wouldn't do it again. How has your perspective on art changed after art school compared to before? An important thing I've learned, being a professional artist doesn't equal living creatively. And you may want one or the other or both. You will want differing degrees of one or the other or both at differing points in your life. It was a hard pill to swallow, but the only way to learn it was to do it through experience and get burnt by the stove to make me realize that I didn't like burning myself on the stove. The stove being the actual day-to-day practice of being a professional artist, which is just kind of selling your creative soul as a commodity and training to make art on demand. And when that was like my day-to-day life for the substance that lets myself keep on living and not starve and not die, it really changed how I felt just about making things, doing personal work or having ideas. It made things feel like there was no point in doing art projects, and there was no point in doing anything new or weird or original or creative or unique or personal, because my focus was first and foremost on leveraging visual art skill as a means to get money. It gets weird when you kind of think about it that way, when your creative force is kind of like tied to your survival condition. I think it takes away a lot of what makes a creative force a creative force. I don't know, it made me feel a lot different having to just make art every day and come home without the art stamina to really want to even make anything for myself, or to even want to sit there and think and dream about projects I'd want to make for myself. That's a really shitty place to be. For me, that was the fork in the road where I had to decide whether or not I wanted to keep going and not necessarily improve, because I was trying to like market and ship the product to get the money kind of thing. A part of me was realistic about improvement in that, like, when I'm spending time making art, you're also not necessarily getting better at art, and by the time you get to a more comfortable skill level in the commercial industry, that might also mean living well below your means once again for several years, if you want to carve out the time to be able to deliberately practice, to linearly improve, to get to the point where you're good enough for you're good enough in the commercial industry for comfortable studio art job that's paying you what you're worth, that you worked hard for to get, and society values you and and Harambe never died, and Destiny's Child, it's getting back together. They're back together. No, it's just not real, unfortunately. There really is nothing that stops you from making art outside the system. Artists need options, flexibility. My perspective on art, and obviously I got a little bit jaded when it got a little bit dark there, when I was confronted with the proverbial artistic storm, when I was, you know, having to go through the storm. At that point in the artist's hero's journey, it made me very jaded, and it made me really question myself, who I was and what I was even doing, or whether I was even capable of making a single good decision and stuff like that. Also, at the same time, having gone through that storm now, that's also the stressor it took to dissolve my artist ego in a way that made me more accepting and appreciative, and to see clearly what exactly it was that I wanted. And I guess that's really what it took for me to see clearly what the landscape, the new open world landscape, was for Artist 2, and how I was able to compartmentalize art to get exactly what I wanted to get out of it, and to give exactly, you know, in my practice, exactly what I wanted to be actively making. And I also needed that now to work with my, once again, student lifestyle. It works. I mean, it was a good thing. It really took a lot of just thinking about the heavy stuff to come out and be so much lighter. One of the biggest things I realized that one of the biggest things everyone knows that, but now that I've properly affirmed, is that nothing stops you from making art outside of the art school institution, but also outside of just like the art system, the greater art system. Can you make a drawing for someone without like posting it on Instagram or as a story or something? Like, is that okay? Are you okay to draw something cool on a sidewalk just to let it get washed away in the rain this afternoon? Is that okay? And even for bigger projects, like maybe you want to do a comic book or you want to do a movie, well, do you need to try to get distribution? Do you need theaters? Do you need that shit? Because videos on YouTube are getting, you know, millions of views, and it's all free and it's accessible and it's for everyone. I recommend watching a movie called Local Legends. It's, you might have to Google it because Vimeo might not sell it in your country, but if you Google Local Legends YouTube, you'll probably find this movie that this guy named Matt Farley made. It's about very interesting little movie in a very interesting style about him sharing his ideas about creativity and making stuff. He basically is a pure artist, but on an incredibly local scale. Like, he'll leave his movies that he makes with his friends, though he'll leave the DVDs around like in parking lots and on signposts and stuff for people to watch, and he'll always leave his number in the movies and on the back of the, you know, the covers for people to call. And apparently he'll always answer your phone if you call him. Like, he wants to talk to people about the art that he's made, while at the same time he makes like a song every day, because he just throws up name songs on iTunes out of sheer quantity, because he'll write a song and perform a song about a certain name so that people with that name might buy that song on their birthday, and he might get some kickback or something for it. It's really interesting. This is an example of someone who's making art outside the system, like outsider art. I really like that movie for its message. It is something that's not often discussed in the art community when talking about creativity, artists, and the art practice and the art product and what we want to do with our art. This is an incredibly unique message that really solidifies this point that anyone can be an artist and that you can just go ahead and do it. Matt Farley's message is like such a strong archetype for a model of creativity, and it's a model that's just been lacking in the discussion. I think so many artists can benefit so much from just looking into the second model of creativity, this creativity 2. Matt Farley's message and like his version of creativity 2 is such an interesting thing for most artists to consider. I think it's incredibly liberating, and I also think it's an incredibly option as just another potential framework for any artist, any creative person to adopt and try out. All of my professional artist friends did their thing, is that they started and they made a decision in that fork in the road to commit. I really think that the art institution is training artists for artists. They're training artist ones, and you're gonna come out and you're gonna be an artist 1. But I came out as an artist 1. That's definitely not enough. We need artist 2s, and the artist 2 is training already, and they're just going for it. They're kind of just working backwards from the end goal. They're getting their feet wet first with running a professional art business on their own and building outwards from where they are right right now. I think that that may be the way that things will be done for the majority of professional artists from here on out. Would you advise young artists to go to art school if they want to pursue it professionally, or to use alternatives, i.e. online courses? Yeah, I would advise to use alternatives because, like in that last example I described, there's much less risk. And at the end of the day, it's the decision and it's the approach that protects the artist, because it's the one that gives the artists options. They will always have options without incurring a loss. And they will always have the ability and the agency to pivot in what they're doing, because artist too has options too. Last question. Yeah. Already on the last question. There's less risk. Just for some stuff I'd recommend off the bat, like for online courses, Schoolism, Nathan Fowkes' composition class on Schoolism. No, I don't think a lot of people can teach it better than that. That's like what, $24 a month for all of Schoolism's classes, you know, Netflix subscription style. I recommend learning Blender for an hour just to see that you don't really need to do much for it to be useful to you as a 2D artist. I recommend another Schoolism course called The Fundamentals of Realism with Brandon Hardesty. He explains it very well, and he also has some clout in the old art education community back in the days when it was just this one forum, conceptart.org, and he has notoriety for being a consistent poster for almost a decade. I think it was like 8 or 9 years or something his thread would run. That's how long he'd been at it to learn painting, to learn like painting realism. And there's really something to be said just about that commitment alone, if that class wasn't very clear and comprehensive already about setting you up for success. Realism, classical fundamentals. There's Forrest Immel has Forrest Immel on Gumroad, Forrestimel, has a beginner's guide to art fundamentals series, and he does a really good job in explaining the fundamentals. And even if you've learned it once, I do think there is a lot of merit hearing the fundamentals explained from separate angles, so that you have just like a more holistic, more well-rounded understanding of how that all works and how you can work it. Okay, now I'm going to speed through the audience questions, and I'm going to write you guys a more thoughtful response in the community post, so you can refer to that. But just off the cuff here, I'll go through the audience questions. Thank you so much for sending these in, and like I said, I'll be sure to, if yours didn't make it into the batch, don't worry, I'll check the post, the community post, so I'll for sure respond to you, and you'll have it there. Okay, audience question 1. As a full-time artist myself who never went to art school, I always just wanted to go for the sake of meeting new people with similar interests, making connections, and enjoying being in an artist-centered environment, as well as trying new things. I'm 23 and never went, but always wondered that if that part of the experience is worth the money and time. Yeah, like I said, you might have already formed an answer for yourself based off of our discussion here, but being 23, you know, it only puts you slightly ahead of the pack, the general art age for art school, you know, 18, 19, 20-ish. So, you know, that'll be cool, but you're not that far ahead, so you won't feel that, you know, you really won't feel left out or experience any weird ageist things. But I think that one thing that will really break you down is you having to do unnecessary assignments, things that don't help your career. And that's tough now, because you're going to go back home and immediately live the truth, like the irrefutable truth that your assignments might not be useful for you. And being in those two worlds might cause some, like, you know, emotional and artistically spiritual clashes, which is not good, which is just a waste of your energy. So better yet to just not be in that situation to begin with. And of course, like I said, the money itself is super risky. I don't know what you guys need to do with your lives, but 50K can just straight up take away someone's ability to having that student debt. Is just being in debt. It's a lot of debt at that. It'll seriously impact your chances of getting a good, like, interest rate on your mortgage. Try and get a house, or to try and finance a new car, or to even have kids. just because you're in debt. And raising kids, like, you want them to grow up in a stable and supported household, or else they might just grow up weird, get real messed up, and want to do something stupid like become an artist. Adopting options too, because they like people with money. So that's something to consider as an older person, maybe entering a different phase in their life, and especially as someone who has a business. Next question: what sort of things should you be looking to get out of art school when going into it, experience-wise? I think it should be like purely experience-wise. I think you should be looking to improve as a human being and as an artist, get better, and you should be looking to self-actualize, become the artist that you want to be. And that's going to be, you know, that image of what that is going to change every year. So it's going to be like it's going to be a moving goalpost. But having that moving goalpost and being willing to put in the experiences for those things, I do think that ensures that you get the most returns for the unique opportunity of what you can do and get in art school that you can only do and get in art school, which is a lot of the social stuff. So experience-wise, just getting to know other people, challenging yourself to try and understand challenging art, or to have your own ideas and your own art challenged, to just be at the edge of your comfort zone. You know, they say growth begins at the edge of your comfort zone. So art school is a really safe place, I think, to experiment with yourself and to see what kind of a person you are. Yeah, it's good when, yeah, experience-wise, yeah. And it would be great if you could learn to love yourself, like somewhere along that line. But that, again, that's not something that art school really is held accountable to, or is really even obligated to do for you. That's an individual's journey. And the ones who do get the most out of art school, experience-wise, are unfortunately the ones who are coming in with already experienced social skills and self-actualized image of themselves, and who have strong awareness for who they are and what they want. And that takes a lot of work, and most students aren't there yet. And that takes a specific, unique kind of personal effort for one to be putting forth to reach that point. A student teacher for elementary asks how to fix, the younger generation, Gen Zs. Yeah, they're being overly critical of their own skills and kind of the pessimism. And that's something for all of us, and not just for Gen Zs. This is happening to all of us, all the same. It's that when we're on social media, the algorithms, they're just tuned for engagement, whatever keeps you on the platform the longest. But in the human psyche, what keeps us hung up and stuck the longest, with also the shortest fuse for being triggered, is usually angry and outrage stuff, and stuff that makes us feel more vulnerable and insecure. And it's basically negativity, right? It's negativity. Negativity is 4 times as strong as positivity. It's 4 times easier to set someone off with negativity. Someone who is set off on negativity will spend 4 times longer on the platform, probably. So when we're tuning for just engagement time, any of these social media platforms that we're on, when it comes to art, like the algorithm wants you to stay on. So I guess that means we're gonna make you, insecure and kind of mad and all that stuff. Obviously, one response is to really try and control ourselves, really try and reevaluate our relationships with social media. It isn't worth the money and the time, because you can be doing other things with your money and time, and in fact you could be doing those very things that you're talking about, meeting people with similar interests and making connections, and getting way more out of it for the mileage of your money and time. You can get way more for your hour or for your dollar. All the strings that come attached with being truly part of the student community also ties you down and keeps you tethered from improving and having more unique, personal, individualized opportunities and experiences for your own you as a person, your own personal growth, which does affect your own artistic growth and your artistic learner growth. I think that's where I'll leave that for now. What sort of things should you be looking to get out of art school when going into it experience-wise? For the experience, what's unique to the art school institution that you can't get from other places is the people in the community and the daily access to all of this stuff. It really is the interpersonal personal stuff. When anything truly useful, right, which is like fundamental, like anything, the best of the fundamentals are stuff that you can readily learn online, because they are so foundational and they are so principled, and everyone kind of starts out teaching the same things because it casts the widest net. So everyone wants a piece of that pie, right? In terms of being on the other side and making that tutorial, making the content, especially on YouTube. It's accessible and it's free. Don't worry about that. Anything truly useful you'd need to know, got it online and it's free. But what can you not get that only art school is providing for you? And yeah, it is the social experiences and the social dynamics and the daily exposure to this kind of environment. So you would have to ask yourself, what is it about the social environment that you think would most help you grow as a person, or just simply what do you want to do in the social environment? Because that social environment is only there as a limited time opportunity, right, for your next 5 years, as long as you commit to the entire strict programming, the art degree workload. And we can call that the art degree workout. You have to follow the art degree workout. So as a student teacher for elementary schools, they're wondering how to show them some cool art. Pessimism is because they're on social media too much. And also I encourage your students to find their baseline for creativity, which means which means figuring out what is the lowest artistic thing that they can do that would still be considered art for them. I encourage your students to look at like bad art out in the real world that they actually like. Dogman isn't drawn that well, but they still like it, and so that's okay. And when we're finding out what exactly we can get away with in terms of the art we like, where they're able to cut corners and where they're not able to cut corners, is how we find out, in our own personal practice, what to focus on and what to focus on later. Will you be better off afterwards for going now being extremely experienced? Oh, am I just kind of better off being more experienced after the art school thing, I think is what they're asking. I don't think anyone can prove that they'd be better off for going. So, there's that reason too. And just my personal reason would just be no, because I've seen so many examples of people who do it in a more sustainable and balanced way, and not to just try and bull rush through it in 4 or 5 years. It seems to me that the real world evidence indicates the alternative, which is not to be bull rushing through and to try fast tracking yourself through the art experience, but to find a way to make it integrated into your lifestyle, find a way to make it adaptable and integrated, so that you can commit and sustain it over a long period of time. And that period will have to be, guys, more than 5 years. That just might be the shit sandwich of being a professional artist, is that like it is a long path, but also the flip side to that is that you can actually just do it. You can just do it at any point. You can be ready and making some money, but it seems to us that is the only path to take. That's art school too, to be just going ahead and trying to get out there into the market with what you have and learning what you need to learn as you go. And yes, that does also involve learning to improve art and improving your art as you go, but while also still selling your art, getting yourself out there, experimenting with branding and consistent posting and platforms and products. Just if for nothing, at least just to sell the first thing off of whatever new thing you're trying, because then you'll know how you feel about it. When we're talking about training in specificity, that experience, this true professional artist experience, this isn't something that can be simulated for you in an art school environment. For one, the cash flow is opposite, right? You're paying to do work, to do your assignments in class, and in the real world, the cash flow is entirely reversed. So it is actually the opposite to say that, oh, the art school assignment work method is any proper like simulation for the real world thing, because the flow of money just goes the opposite way, and you can argue that it's not about the money, but it is, because you made me pay money to be here and do this, you know what I mean? So the money is a factor of consideration here. Yeah, it seems like Art School 2 being our new art school, 2nd edition, wants you just immediately getting your feet wet in every single aspect of the professional artist experience, so that you learn it and you can begin to learn what you need to learn, and you can begin to understand how you feel about doing this particular type of work, and you can begin to feel out and understand how you feel about scaling in this particular type of work or improving in this particular. Next question: is it ever overwhelming? It can be very overwhelming. I think a lot of people can handle it very well, and again, that's due in part to who they were before they came to art school. Mostly, I don't support the idea that like you learn like good proper study habits and how to time manage and stuff in school, because like if that isn't an explicit lesson, that isn't a singular module, and if you wanted to say that you're teaching discipline and meta learning and self-coaching and awareness and that stuff, you'd have to like kind of at least give me a syllabus or a criteria for how you plan on doing this, and what the hands-on activities are, and what the discussion topics are, blah blah blah. And you can't really say that as a circumstance of just you doing a bunch of assignments in a row, you're gonna learn all this other stuff as a result. You're betting on consequences, and the individual is just too unique. It depends too much on the person. So why not spend the time and figure that out first? You'll have to eventually. But being overwhelmed is really bad, in my opinion. Being overwhelmed, if you're trying to study in art school, is bad, because it's just isn't optimal for studying. It isn't optimal for focus, and it isn't optimal for remembering stuff. It isn't optimal for being engaged. It's not optimal for the emotional association of school being this place that overwhelms you and causes you stress. And what the stress does is it holistically causes a whole cascading chain of problems onto every other aspect of your life, right? Like that's what stress does. Like lots of science dudes wrote about this already, okay? We basically just can't argue that being stressed makes optimal learning better. It doesn't. Being stressed makes optimal learning much worse. School can be very stressful for most people. I do think most people get very stressed in school. Yeah, it's unhealthy, and it causes a chain reaction of other problems that we're all trying to compensate for in making sacrifices in other aspects of our life to try and catch up. But to try and recover from the effects of being in an overwhelming place and being constantly overwhelmed. Whoa. And so you're not ever at your learning baseline. You're always beneath it. You're not ever at a neutral. You'll never know how you really learn on a normal day. Because at a certain point in your student career, there aren't a lot of normal days anymore. It's just, you're just trying to get your assignments done. What sort of pressure or external factors, art school or otherwise, do you think boost art skills or productivity and learning of an artist? Nice. What sort of this question's asking, what sort of external factors affect your art gains the most, basically? How the people that you're around the most have the biggest impact on shaping your thoughts and ideas and your choices. Make sure you're with a good supportive crowd, or at least a neutral one. It's interesting that you would talk about pressure and external factors, because that's coming from this place of, you're tapping into the dark side of motivation, the dark side of art improvement, which is to associate with negativity, putting pressure on yourself. Having been trying to learn art and still trying to learn art for as long as I have, I really try to go to pressure as a last resort, and these like dark side places, these like dark side of the force places. It's just not consistently sustainable, and at the end of the day, you're always gonna hurt Obi-Wan. It's all about looking after number one. What I think helps you get good the fastest as an artist, I think, is being genuinely curious. Like honestly, like really wanting to know something that it kind of bothers you, really wanting to know how to get good at painting, really wanting to know how to make your painting look like, this artist's painting, or how to pull more dimensionality into this or that. It's just like really being curious about any specific art thing is gonna involve you and engage you into it just natural. So it's like you're riding a train line, and the ticket's free, and it's just free art gains, just based off of your natural inclinations and your curious nature. And as a result of that, when you're learning, then you're having fun. So either of those two things, just being more curious, like being like really and genuinely being curious, or finding ways to genuinely be having more fun. That's what I think gets you good the fastest, because a byproduct of those two things, of being genuinely curious or genuinely having fun, is that you're probably going to be focused in what you're doing, and you're probably going to be engaged in what you're doing, and you're probably going to do it for longer than 30 minutes. As a result of those three things, there's a high chance you'll go into flow state, and once you're in flow state, it's like all of your awarenesses are suddenly protected at the same time. It seems easier to do the thing, you're in the groove, you're in the zone, you know, that's flow state, as they've studied it. And once you're there, you can be in there like we've experienced for hours at a time, only to feel like moments have gone by, but somehow it does feel like an eternity when you're fully present at the same time. That time is just a construct, man. The best external forces to control for maxing out your art gains might just be the ones in your immediate surrounding, designing a fun space to let your curiosity flow and to set yourself up for success in your studying, having fun, being engaged, being curious, being in the flow. Flow state is super helpful and super useful in learning. That's something that we can tap into that's something that like we can do on command, but you do have to like train it, and especially in like today's attention climate, it's a skill that people are kind of losing. And I can only say that like half of the time, but especially if you're sitting down for a learning session, you absorb way more, you're mostly immune to distractions, and you're gonna enjoy it, and you're gonna learn way more and get better faster. It's kind of like being in the hyperbolic time chamber, just like a little bit at a time. So you have to just basically commit to your routines and commit to your healthy studying habits and environments, so that you can consistently commit and control immersing and learning or working in the flow state, being genuinely curious or genuinely having fun. What's the main difference between the way that art is taught through traditional brick and mortar school and an online mentorship? What kind of experiences can you gain in one that you can't in the other? Oh, cool. Yeah, and I have done, that's a good question, because that is a big market of alternative art education that we haven't quite talked about, is like the online mentorship. And I have done a few online mentorships, and they're good. One-on-one, I'd go for group. Actually, no, I did both. I did both the group and one-on-one, and they're both good. I think what matters the most is how much time you can put aside for that mentorship and how much time you can commit to it. Because you can show up with a proper list of 10 really good questions, or you can show up just kind of with whatever you were able to finish last minute the night before as something to talk about this week, because you already bought the 10 session mentorship package or whatever. Typically, I think if you can afford the price, like one-on-one mentorships are totally worth it, because you can choose who it is. And if you can't, and you have the money saved up, you can always pitch someone the idea of doing an email mentorship even, or just like looking at my thumbnail and sending me a voice clip. You can arrange how this might work with someone, and I think you'd be surprised kind of negotiating power you have, having just, let's say for example, $600. That's how much our classes in Canada typically cost. It's like 600 to 1,000. That money going directly into an artist's pocket, and an artist that you look up to, an artist that you want to learn from at that, like 100% of that money going towards them. That's also like a different of education and work now, that I think it's a model that also benefits the artist, and it's a model that looks out for the art student. And online mentorships, you're basically doing like Zoom, kind of like a Zoom call thing, and you're having a live discussion. And what I like about online mentorships is that there's a lot of paint overs, and it's cool to see in the moment how simple some solutions are to your biggest art or design problems. Seeing it done live in front of you does make something click in your brain. And the whole paint overs thing, is this something they do in art school? It should be, and I'm sure it is. However, in my experience, there was only one paint. I got one paint over in my 5 years at art school. So it can completely depend. What's your take on being original? Does it help you improve? Yeah, I think being original is just you following your natural like curiosities and and seeing where it goes. Being honest with yourself like that. That's how you like ride the attention wave and are able to consume so much content to kind of be an expert at like the one new weird thing you've hyper focused on this month before going on just letting yourself get carried in the wind to see what the next thing will be next month. This is typical for a lot of artists, and this is something that like we need to lean into, which is the fact that artists have like really unique textures of attention. They just have like a different way of navigating the world with our attention, and that should be helping us make more art and helping us expand what we know, what we understand, and what we think we like. So being honest with yourself, naturally letting that attention path go off in all those weird nooks and crannies, giving yourself the time, giving yourself the opportunity to explore those things and to reflect. That's what I call being original. That's what will make you original. That does take time. It does take time to read new books, try new movies, try new different experiences, and to research this or that thing, or to prototype this or that thing for the researching of this or that thing. I think it's easier to do that when you don't have the time and workload constraints of an art school student. So if you were to ask me, I mean, it wouldn't even make sense to ask this, but if an art school learner and a self-taught learner who could be more original in 5 years, I'd probably say the self-taught learner, because they have less restrictions. They have less, restrictions in their life. Okay, next question. When building a portfolio for art school, should I focus on the basics like landscapes, realism, or should I focus on what my specialties are? I do a lot of creature design, surrealism. I want to show more of my strengths, but I've always been told that portfolios should contain specific contents. And I'll bring up my principle once again, the training in specificity. So I would work backwards from where you want to be, what your goal is. If that's to be doing creatures, then have a creature portfolio. The general rule is you don't need to focus on basics for your portfolio. Your work should demonstrate those basics already. So if you have a realism style, obviously the realism will come through in the technical skill of your style. For creature design and surrealism, like maybe your creature designs look kind of surreal. If you're also just like a surrealist painter, I wouldn't put that in the same portfolio, because portfolios are usually focused for the specific position. You can definitely have like a surrealism section on your site, Instagram, circle group thingy for your surrealist work. Typically the portfolio should be cohesive and tailored specifically to the job that it's, being applied for. Next question. I'm going to art school and wanting to be an art teacher, so my question would be, did you feel ready as an artist to become a teacher skill-wise? Did you worry that you didn't have the skills necessary to teach? I would say I felt ready, but like I was in a unique case because I had some instructing experience even from high school that I just ended up staying on board with all the way through university. Just the mileage alone of just one day waking up and saying, oh shit, I've been doing this for 11 years. Just like the decade, once you've passed a decade of doing the thing, like you do feel a bit more competent and a little bit more confident in it just for that decade, just for being in double digits experience alone. If you're going the university path with doing an art teacher, usually involves doing like a double degree that they kind of weave into each other. They use each other as options kind of thing, like with education and probably visual art or fine art. They usually do have a practicum component where you would be doing like, you'd have labs and stuff, but I'd research the job itself in your area and see like how long it takes to get on school board and make sure you know like the pay and the pay scale, how the pay scales move up and stuff like that. That's all stuff that like nobody really tells you specifically to do, that they just kind of assume. And because they assume, sometimes when students are just like really eager and they want to just they want to do something and know that they've made the right decision, like it's easy to close ourselves off to the rest of the world and to the reality of things. And I think that's because students are very sensitive, but also like that hurts us in the long run. So yeah, make sure you know how much like teachers get paid and how the subsystem works, because you'll probably have to be a substitute and be in that like kind of like adjunct professor limbo, except not a professor but as a teacher. trying to get a full-time school board position, and then how that school board position scales. What advice do you have for younger artists wanting to pursue art as a career? Yes, specifically pursuing art as a career involves learning a lot about yourselves and involves really the hands-on experience of doing all those art as career things, which is just like 17 different things. So I'd say you should just like try and get started right now. Or if you don't feel that your art is good enough yet, try and learn art right now. See how you feel there. Pursuing art as a career is, which I've come to appreciate, is a very unique and deliberate thing. It should be a very deliberate decision. And it does involve a lot of hidden checks, like, hey, are you sure you're okay with doing this? There's a lot of hidden shit sandwiches to doing art as a career professionally. Having your main income, to have your main source of income be exclusively made off of you doing artwork. But in terms of learning art, in terms of just like making art, learning art, just go for it and don't stop. I've lost all motivation after getting into art school. How do I get it back? I really want to love art again. I really don't recommend doing the thing I did, which was like to no, I'm not even gonna say it again. I'm not even gonna say it again. Like just brutalizing your health for the marginal chance of getting a bit better at art really doesn't make sense. Not a good investment. The tough answer would be that you might have to leave art school, or at least take a break from it. You can take a year break from it, because putting it off for just 1 year suddenly affords you the flexibility of making whatever you want. Usually when we get to make whatever we want, it all comes back. Just gently walk yourself back to the place of making personal passion projects, one small thing at a time, and one bigger thing after another. I really do believe that eventually, it's just very soon, it's all gonna start coming back to you, as long as you're just doing what you want creatively. That does involve having more time, more flexibility, and more emotional, physical, creative, financial stability. So it'd be unrealistic for me to say, hey, somehow find more time, or like more money, or find a way through the rigidity of your current lifestyle and committed training program, which is art school. I just, you know what I mean? Like, I really can't say that to someone who is in art school, because it's just not realistic, because they're not able to do those things being in art school. So I do think that the first step might be to see if you need to take a break from art school, if you're able to take a break from art school. And yeah, you can learn to love art again, and look up some books on creativity. We don't, like I said, we artists, we don't have a consistent mental model of how creativity works, of how the hero's journey, of what the artist's hero's journey looks like, and what those phases and milestones and characters, those and archetypes are along the artist's hero's journey. We don't have a common language to discuss these things, and I think we really should. And that kind of, what is that whole domain? And that's just kind of the realm of creativity, creative theory. And I think that's a great place to start when it comes to asking those big art questions, like, why am I even doing this? Like, why don't I want to make anything anymore? What did I want to make even in the first place, and will I ever want to make it again? Those are creativity questions. And again, the unpopular answer is you have to put in the work yourself. Any productive or net positive result in your relationship to creativity will have to come as a result of your 100% of your own blood, sweat, and tears, basically, right? But at the same time, you can also say that you irrefutably earned those gains, and that you deserve like the happy outcome, and the content creative theory, and how you feel about yourself as a creative person. When you do feel good about it, you will have earned it, like, and you will have known that, like, you 100% have done the work, and only you could have done the work to get yourself here in the better place. So I think that's very empowering once you're on the other side. And are in a more satisfied or hopefully positive place with your relationship to creativity, which is you knowing that because it's such an abstract, nebulous, soft skill, you had to earn it on your own. You get to take credit for it. That's very empowering to an artist. Knowing they can do it once means knowing that they can do it again, means knowing that they can possibly do it for someone else too. How much did you learn from teaching art compared to studying it? I learned a lot from teaching art because it makes you reevaluate what it is you know about the thing, and it makes you also kind of filter out what is essential about certain concepts, especially when students are struggling with those concepts. It then forces you to reapproach singular concepts from a different angle. So you're constantly drilling yourself on fundamentals, just as much as we are trying to work with the students to get a grasp of them and to get their hands dirty and to not be scared of it. Yeah, like we're a student just as much in that class learning, and that's what's really cool about it. You do feel like you have to be kind of performative sometimes to role model an ideal learner that's also realistic. So you're okay to mess up, but you tend to just mostly stay positive and productive, incredibly constructive about every single deliberate thing you do. So as a result, you end up actually kind of like becoming that person when you're trying to, you know, be a fake good role model to your students. Eventually, one day you might just forget and just honestly start acting genuinely like a role model. So that's cool. It's a great way to improve a lot of these you know, softer artist 2 skills. That's not a problem with this plus minus equals thing. If everyone had someone above them mentoring them from one step ahead, if everyone had a student, someone that they took accountability in teaching for, that would also make them challenge themselves as a teacher and be exposed to all this, like this whole new domain of interesting artist 2 soft skills. And if everyone had an equal, their peers on the same path, on the same level as them, that they can support themselves, support each other, and gently push each other at the same time. The plus minus equal system just kind of naturally, I think in theory, naturally, it builds a community of mentorship and improvement. A community of mentorship and learning. It's like a positive feedback loop of mentorship, learning, and improvement. And yeah, one of the most impressive things I think about that system is that everyone kind of has to teach. As a result of trying to teach, not only just is it cool to just share stuff and it's cool to teach, but also teaching brings you into this other world of this really interesting, weird craft and practice. You learn you're exposed to so many new challenges and interesting little things as a result of it that you wouldn't really quite think about otherwise. So how much did I learn from teaching art compared to studying it? Yeah, I'd say at this point both are equal, because even as a student we were still also, I'd call it, teaching each other, helping each other out. A lot of learning comes from bouncing off those ideas and testing your art theories and your improvement theories on your friends, taking feedback and course correcting, readjusting when it doesn't land. That's all teaching. We were doing both, teaching and studying, and I think it's way more fun to do both too. Next question: how beneficial is art school for digital artists? I think digital art. I don't think most schools get specifically into digital painting techniques as much as like just generic design manipulation techniques. So it really depends on the school, and it would depend again more so on the instructor, which isn't something you necessarily get to choose. Like, you don't get to choose which instructors they hire, for example, right? Because if you can get anyone as a contract instructor and pay the minimum wage, it's mostly out of your hands, unfortunately. So I wouldn't count on having a training program there catered respectfully for an aspiring digital artist's time. And once again, just learning new software, constantly learning new software, self-learning new software and digital skills as needed might be a core skill of artist 2. Are the connections, next question, are the connections made in art school really as useful as people say? Would it be much harder to make those connections by yourself without art school? Yeah, it is. The answer is yes, it is harder to make those connections without art school, because you have to be a specific type of extroverted person, which you can practice, but of course, you know, most artists were a little bit weird, right? And we're doing art for a reason, and it's probably because we didn't put our skill points into being socially adept, like that adept that young. So in terms of making connections though, it can be harder for a young person to make connections if they don't feel like confident about themselves and just be ready to put themselves out there and go talk to a group of strangers in a school that they don't necessarily even go to. But are the connections made in art school really as useful as people say? I don't think so. I think that's objectively speaking useful as in getting you jobs or setting you up towards helping you in your career goals or helping you in, I don't know, be a professional artist or whatever. That depends mostly on the schools you're going to, in those hotspot schools, right? Where they have industry people working in the school. So your teachers may be industry people. You might be able to get jobs from them or whatever, but you know, permitting you get to like an industry skill level, right? So the connections in art school typically don't go anywhere after art school unless you're in those hotspots. And if you are in those hotspots, then yes, you're paying big money for school in those places for the fact that the school is drawing from industry resource, its local industry resource, getting practitioners with direct industry experience. Okay, next question. To what extent is the mindset of connecting with industry specialists true when it comes to attending art schools? I wouldn't just go to an art school to connect with industry specialists, just because you can also do that on LinkedIn or through emails and just, I don't know, try maybe tweeting and stuff. The $50,000 price tag and commitment to the institution doesn't necessarily have anything to do with keeping a door open to an industry specialist in terms of contact. I think that's wrong. I think the mindset of going to school for the sake of being connected is not something you should count on when making an art school decision, because that's not something that any place can really guarantee. And as well, in the places like these industry hotspots, there are also like other schools, like prep schools or just like workshops. These industry people may also be teaching at other places. They may also just be teaching online. They may not be teaching online, but if you were to ask them about maybe a non-committal casual mentorship pitch, maybe they might be willing to humor you, because most people are willing to take money to teach the thing that they're already an expert in. Would you recommend going to art school for a master's degree? I wouldn't recommend doing that. I personally don't think I could do that, and I don't think I would tell other people to do it either, just because the academic route for art isn't easy either. It's also not guaranteed at all. You don't know which master's program will have you doing what, and just in the same sense that like just applying for the bachelor's art school, you really have no idea what the curriculum is until you're actually there doing it. First year, second year, third year, and fourth year. At that point, you may have already given the school like half of all your student loans. Like you're already 2 years of loans deep into degree. That's like all of that is really no different in the master's degree. And like I said, going for like a PhD, like yeah, that opens you up to a PhD, but like this like tenure thing is also just is also risky in the average tenure track for professors. Tenure being just like full-time employment with benefits for professors, basically, and not being like a substitute professor, like an adjunct professor, a contract professor. That process can take on average of 6 years in Canada, I think. So you really have to weigh these options out too, because I really don't think you'd be making over like 60K, definitely not as like adjunct or a contract professor in the arts. I think that's risky mostly for this time thing, because you don't know where you'll be 6 years in the future. You don't know what you'll need or what you think you'll need 6 years into the future. And obviously, you can get more government loans for master's programs, but that's like another 30K of debt for you. And though it's opening a few doors in academia, it's just the burden of debt will be closing off many more doors, in my opinion. Everything that's risky with the undergrad art degree is also just as risky with the master's programs as well. And then the last question here, what were some of your worst experiences in art school? Teachers, critiques on your art, etc. If that's too sensitive, then what about your different experiences in teaching? I think my worst experience in art school, in the 2 art schools I've been to, is that it's the big picture worst experience is that it's kind of made me give up on arts, and that's such a sucky thing to say because I do want art school to work as an institution. It would be cool if this was a standardized milestone of a chapter in a growing artist's training, and it was effective and it was stable and it guaranteed their health and their dignity and their options for having a family and or mortgages and loans and that stuff. Like, but it isn't. It isn't that, and it's never going to be that. It's not moving anywhere closer to being that, unfortunately. So for that reason, that's my big worst art experience. I'd say a more personal art experience that was bad is just, as I've explained with Celestia, this unfortunate fact that 80% of all my studio classes, so 80% of all the actual design, illustration, you know, drawing, anatomy, figure, blah, blah, blah classes, we spent them just kind of sitting around, go up to the teacher to get a crit, or we're sitting around doing a critique, like one person at a time in a dark room, and it'll take 6 hours. It'll take the entire day. You just sit there in the dark for like an entire day, but you didn't need to be there. I can text you some feedback on your piece. You can text me your feedback so we can all stay home and work on our thing. We didn't need to also give up the 2-hour commute that it takes to get to and from school. We also didn't need to commit 2-hour lunch break that we have where no one really can go home nor do anything, you know, that they can come back to. I don't know, it's just an awkward block of time. So the opportunity cost was just too high of having this rigid, structured program that just I do not think made a real effort to work for their students or to deliver anything useful for, unfortunately, largely speaking. So that's my big worst experience is I spent most of my time in art school just kind of like sitting around because we had to. Weird. I couldn't leave. You can't leave your class either. Like, you can't leave early and stuff. Yeah, you can't skip a class more than twice, and they'll kick you out the program. It's written in the syllabus. Yeah. For me, it was hard to see. There's another strange experience for me. I do think it was a bad experience. just maybe because I came from a more unique background here, just in this specific context, that I think a lot of my teachers got just like really complacent, and it just became sign up for crit, but it was just like your 10 minutes of consulting up there with the teacher. It sucks because I'd go and, you know, teach on the weekends, work with the student instructors and volunteers, and I take them and I'd be teaching them how to teach the students how to swim and stuff. And by and large, these high schoolers teach better and work harder than my art teachers. When I see high schoolers teaching better, like being more engaging than my art teachers, like, wow, I'm just like, I don't know what to say. That's just like, I was so disappointed. I don't know what to do. I knew what to do. It's time to put my head down, get the fucking degree and run.
Now, after this point, James goes on to share another full hour's worth of further insights into the topic, the entirety of which is even more compelling than what he's already shared so far, which is really saying something. But because this video is already probably more than 2 hours long, I was not able to include it here. That being said, I will have it uploaded as its own video if you'd like to hear more, and it'll be linked in the description and the iCard above as soon as it's finished. And give me a minute with that one, because editing that will be a beast. And I will be contributing my own insights gained as a professional artist who didn't go to art school in addition to it. But before I finally let you leave this video, I would like to end it with his final thoughts from that segment, because I think it's a really important piece of advice that's very poignant to stand as the final point here.
You must be willing to take risks if you want to live a creative existence. But if you're going to gamble, know that you're gambling. Never roll the dice without being aware that you're holding a pair of dice in your hands, and make certain that you can actually cover your bets, both emotionally and financially. My fear is that many people pay through the nose for advanced schooling in the arts without realizing that they're actually gambling, because on the surface, it can just look like they're making a sound investment in their future. After all, isn't school where people go to learn a profession? And isn't a profession a responsible and respectable thing to acquire? But the arts are not a profession in the manner of regular professions. There is no job security in creativity, and there never will be. Going into massive debt in order to become a creator then can make a stress and a burden out of something that should only only have ever been a joy and a release. And after having invested so much in their education, artists don't immediately find professional success, which, as most artists, can feel like failures. Their sense of having failed can interfere with their creative self-confidence and maybe even stop them from creating at all. Then they're in the terrible position of having to deal not only with a sense of shame and failure, but also with the steep monthly bills that will forever remind them of their shame and failure. Most of all, there's this truth. No matter how great your teachers may be, no matter how esteemed your academy's reputation, eventually you will have to do the work by yourself. Eventually, the teachers won't be there anymore. The walls of the school will fall away and you will be on your own. The hours that you will then put into practice, study, auditions, and creation will be entirely up to you. The sooner and more passionately you get married to this idea that it's ultimately entirely up to you, the better off you'll be. That's the lady who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. That's it. Thank you so much for your time. And you know what? They can't stop artists from contacting each other. If you ever have any questions or anything, I'm most active on YouTube, Catgirl Research Society, and on Instagram, Circle Brush. I'll always check those accounts, so leave a comment anywhere. I will always get back to you.
So with all that said, you finally reached the end of the video. Whether art school is or isn't right for you is something that I can't say, and I don't think it's something anyone can say. All I can recommend, especially following James's advice and input, is that you do your research carefully before committing your time and money to it, because you can't get that back, and you want to know what you're getting into before it's too late to get out. Thank you again to James for going so far above and beyond to show me, and all of you, an in-depth view of art school and its value, or lack thereof at times. And please, again, go check him out on social media via the links in the description. Thank you guys for watching. Special thanks as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Joseph Solomon, Unknown Code, Dolph, Lucian Izapa, and Abyss Reborn, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, This Is Totally My Name, Unity, Cora Fear, Jamisha Walker, Shirome Artiste, Elenkshi, and Soul Crystal for their support, and I'll see you in my next one.